Okay, everybody, I'd like to call this meeting to order. Before we get started, I would like to acknowledge that we're privileged to meet on the Stalo unceded traditional territory of Chilliwack, Puyallup, and Samath. And with this statement, we acknowledge our ongoing commitment to meaningful reconciliation. The board also acknowledges the marginalization that many members of our community have experienced, whether as a result of race, sexual orientation and gender identity, or other personal circumstances. The board is committed to providing a working and learning environment that recognizes the inherent dignity of all persons, that is inclusive of all, and that treats everyone with respect. Can I get a motion to adopt the agenda, please? Trustee Bondar, seconded by Trustee Westerby. I need to make a motion to amend the agenda, actually. I want to amend the agenda to reverse the order of public budget presentation and the strategic plan presentation. If I have a seconder, I'll explain why. Trustee Bondar, thank you. This was an accident. The question period that we added specifically about the public budget presentation is supposed to come after the budget presentation, and it's in the wrong order. So if we reverse those, then we will have the questions come right after people have gotten the presentation about the budget. So is there any discussion on that amendment? Okay, all those in favor of the amendment that I just said of reversing 2.1 and 2.2? Thank you, that passes. Are there any other additions or amendments to the agenda?
Thank you. I have a question. Noted I had two motions put through by a notice on the last agenda. And they are not on this agenda. And I received an email from the chair telling me that they would not be on the agenda. So my question is, what is the process for a board member to bring items or motions or anything at all to the attention of the colleagues? Because these motions belong to the table. They don't belong to just the chair and the vice chair. And so what is the process that we have for moving forward?
So trustees can propose motions through email or through notice of motion. The chair, vice chair, superintendent, secretary, treasurer, and executive assistant then sit down and discuss those the same way as we discuss all the other things that are going on the agenda. And we have limited time to address everything, as you know, based on the board's work plan. It's the obligation of the chair to make sure that everything that comes before the board is makes sense, that it's not a waste of time necessarily for trustees. After the agenda is made, it comes before the board. We vote on the agenda. Trustees are able, if they do not like the agenda, to make amendments and ask for things to be added. So there's always a backup. If you had something that you believe should be on the agenda and you want to make a motion to add it and you get a seconder and the trustees all vote, then your item will get added.
So just to clarify, you have veto power. If I send a motion that you decide you don't want to be on the agenda, you have the veto power to remove that. This is why I'm asking, because I don't know how to get my motions onto the agenda.
I have told you what the process. Thank you, Trustee Bonner. Yeah. So I answered your question. I've told you what.
Excuse me. Did you cut my mic just now? Yes.
I cut your mic
because. Okay. Perfect. Great. All right,
Trustee Bondar did a point of order. So when someone does
you cut my mic.
Yes, when a trustee does a point of order, it interrupts all other parts of the business. That is the rules of Robert's Rules of Order. So I answered your question. If you have an item that is not on the agenda, you can make a motion and people can second it and it can potentially get added to the agenda. So that is your recourse if you do not agree with the decision of the CBC committee. Thank you. All those in favor of the agenda as presented? Opposed? Motion carries. Okay, thank you, trustees. Can I get a motion to approve the minutes, please? Trustee Swanky, seconded by Trustee Bondar. Are there any errors or omissions in the minutes? Seeing none, all those in favor of approving the minutes as circulated? Thank you. Motion carries. Okay, we are on to strategic plan presentation, 90-day cycle update.
Thank you, Judge. Really quickly, this is our second year where we have schools have a 90-day cycle. The school district plans are also aligned with the 90-day cycle, and purposefully we did this a couple of years ago. And the reason for that is the 90-day cycle is more predictable. Then your annual plans that schools have, and also for the school district, it's a lot more easier to accurately forecast what actions schools or districts need to take over the next 12 weeks as opposed to the school year. The 90-day planning cycle allows schools and the district to take advantage of what they're learning throughout the year and to be able to implement that. Also allows school and district staff to experience growth more frequently as opposed to waiting for the end of the school year regarding the outcomes of the 90-day plan. And so that is so. We got a schematic. We normally present the month of December, the month of March, and the month of June regarding the work the district has done for the 90-day cycle. For today, Assistant School Superintendent Paula Jordan, Kirk Savage, and David Mel will present. We're going to choose two pieces, numeracy as well as transitions. And then at the end, during my update, we'll provide another update. GWG is going to be talking about a unique program that they have in supporting students. So, over to Dr. Savage.
Okay, thank you, Superintendent Rule Progasm. We actually we have a number of stories, as Superintendent mentioned. We're actually going to highlight one of the early learning stories. We have and we're going to highlight one of the secondary non-enrolling. And then we have a third one, which is actually going to be, it's around Graham Y. It's on here, but that we're going to hold that over, and it's going to be presented during the superintendent's update. We'll have some special guests from GWG here to talk about that. So without further ado, we'll jump into, under transitions, we have early learning and childcare. This is an update around our just before preschool and before and after school care. So just before preschool is a preschool for students that are 4 years old. We have this running right now at Robertson and at Watson, with a third site at Vetter in the future, but right now it's running there. This one page of this report talks about the impact and the good news stories happening around that programming. And then we have our before and after school care, which is for school-age students. And currently in our district, we have before and after school care at all of our elementary sites except for 4. The 4 that we do not have right now is Tyson, Unsworth, Chiam, and Greendale. And the plan is for at the end of next school year, we will have before and after school childcare at all elementary sites. So that's an exciting thing down the road. And yeah, just lots of great impact here around this programming and our early learning program through the leadership of District Principal Nicole Driscoll is flourishing and really taking off in our district. So lots of information. There's another story in here around our family navigator position, so you can look at that, and that's also connected to the great work that's happening. So next story, we're going to look at, I'm just going to pull back here, we're going to look at secondary non-enrolling learning update.
Perfect. Thanks, Kirk. So super exciting when you think about those early learning centers, and that at the end of next school year, we will have just before in every single elementary school. That's pretty exciting work. So secondary non-enrolling, as the board knows, we did approve some staffing to go, well, you approved some staffing to go into our secondary schools, specifically targeted to those non-enrolling positions. And the work that staff, the prioritized work of that staff, you'll notice at the top of this one-page document, is around collaboration with classroom teachers, so that non-enrolling staff collaborating with classroom teachers, students, and parents around competency-based IEPs. We also talk about the priority work of utilizing, we've called it a collaboration document, which really outlines the roles and responsibilities of a case manager, the roles and responsibilities of a classroom teacher, and where there is overlap for that collaboration to happen to support our students. We know that this time is also going to be used to implement our competency-based IEPs. We're on this journey as a system, and this time will be helpful in that implementation. We've also talked a little bit about the use of class profiles. So lots of conversation at our elementaries and middles around class profiles. This conversation is just starting to gain some momentum at our secondary schools, as well as some small group instruction and some co-planning and co-teaching. And so what we've done is as a bit of a system check to see where our secondary staff, both the case managers are as well as classroom teachers are with respect to this work. So you will see those teachers have done a self-assessment, and we're extremely vulnerable to share where they are in this work, because we need to know where our starting place is so that we can build the adults learning plan to move this work forward. So the three key questions that were asked, the first was around where are you on a proficiency scale with respect to working with a colleague on creating a class profile. And so we provided some examples of what a class profile could look like, and this is where staff at secondary shared where they are currently at. The second question was around collaborating with a colleague to plan for competency-based IEP curricular goals. And then the third question was engaging in collaborative opportunities with colleagues, utilizing UDL principles as to guide their instruction. So I think what we are finding is this is super helpful information as we are planning forward to get us to the end of the year, but also into next year. The key things that came out of the responses were that from our staff is a real desire for additional training around utilizing class profiles to drive instruction. Also a strong, there's lots of value in collaboration. We're hearing that from our secondary staff. As well as you can see from that self-assessment, there's various levels of confidence with respect to implementing those UDL principles in their daily instruction. And the reason we're sharing this with the board now is that this is the kind of the first systems check, and we're hopeful that in a year from now, utilizing this time, that we'll be able to see a shift right in those responses as we do that system check again next year at this particular time. In addition to this particular work, we know we are going to take a close look at our competency-based IEPs at secondary, and so we are doing a bit of contract work out there just to have someone from the outside have a look at a range of our competency-based IEPs and give us some feedback on what are the areas that we need to continue to lean into to strengthen that particular work. So we'll be looking forward to sharing that with the board in our next 90-day cycle before the end of the school year.
Okay, thank
Thanks,
you.
Dirk.
Speaking of next 90-day cycles, Mr. Manuel.
Thank you. I get to be a little bit of a commercial for what's to come. So at the bottom, I just want to draw your attention to some of the things to look forward to in our next update in June. So first, we will have some update on our children and youth in care, the work that's happening now and will continue. You will hear a little bit more about how we're doing with our secondary non-enrolling. The grad coaches, which you have been on that journey with us, will provide more of an update in June. Integrated care plan, elementary literacy collab. That project has been, you have through learning sessions been getting some updates. We will be able to share some data at that point. Our work with student agency. In this cycle, you do have a video clip around some of the work that's happened with our Indigenous student voice and agency group. But we will give you an update on the whole work for this year. Accessibility committee will provide an update, and we're going to provide an update on numeracy, as well as our physical literacy work as well. So things to look forward to.
Thank you so much, everybody. Trustees, are there any questions? Trustee Moss.
So I have a question regarding UDL, which is Universal Design Learning. So what does that look like in comparison to regular learning? Comparison to our practices now or previously?
Thanks for that question, Trustee Moss, because we do throw in a lot of acronyms, lots. So, Universal Design for Learning. So the acronym for that is UDL. And really, what it is, it's around how are we designing our lessons so that the learning is accessible for all students in our classroom. So we hear Shelley Moore talk about the bowling pins on the outside, but it's deeper than that. In addition to that, it's about how do we ensure as teachers in our classrooms, we are designing our lessons that are accessible for all learners. Yeah, I think that's in its simplest form. Yeah.
Sorry, audience members, please turn off your phones, put them on silent, or, thank you. Trustee Moss, I pressed the button, so you need to press again.
Could you give us a concrete example of what that looks like? Thanks.
So for some of our students who, for example, they struggle with written output, right? So are we utilizing strategies in our classrooms that afford those students an opportunity to demonstrate their learning in different ways? So things like voice to text, utilizing a conversation with a classroom teacher to be able to express their learning rather than having to write it on. In an essay format. So the teacher still understands that the student has accessed their learning and they can demonstrate their understanding in a different way.
Trustee Swanky.
Thank you, Chair. Really appreciate highlighting the early learning opportunities, and like fantastic to hear it's expanding next year. I did wonder, thinking about aligning the availability of these opportunities with like core district values of inclusion and equity, when we have children arriving that have support needs, are we looking at supported child development funding? Do we make EAs available? Like, how do we ensure we have that capacity both this year and as we expand to make sure that that's a learning opportunity available at every school in the district?
Okay, so we do have a program at Central called Seamless Day, where we have an ECA qualified worker that starts with the before and after school care students and then transitions into the kindergarten classroom and supports that class. So we have some staff that at that site in the Seamless Day program. We've actually taken that model and we are planning on it. We're expanding that into some of our other before and after school cares, because we can actually afford to create that extra bit of staffing. So I think that's what you're getting at. How are we utilizing our programming to support students as they transition?
If I may clarify, Chair,
Yep.
I'm running specifically about the, like, say 4-year-olds, like the
Yep.
just before learners.
Yep.
So they're not yet in kindergarten. They don't have a designation within the public ed system, but they're presenting need, and there's capacity that may not be available within the classroom based on the staffing ratios. How do we ensure that we're able to support those students?
Well, so there is some funding that comes through, I believe, through CDC, but not all. As we know, not all students are always fully funded, and so therefore we have to utilize some limited funds that we have we have the ability to support some students to an extended a bit, but we can't always, there is always limits, right? And so we're working through that, and as the program grows and and the before and after school care is a paid program. Like, parents do pay for that service as well, so there is some dollars there. There's grant money and there's partnerships, so we're growing it. It's not I don't have a perfect answer for you. It's not dissimilar to the school system in a way. Like, we are always in our K-12 system. We are always we don't always have all of the resources that we would wish we had, right?
And if I may, Chair, the comment is not intended to. I think there's incredible work going on in the district. I'm more drawing attention or wanting to learn more about whether or not we're funded in order for these just before the before preschool learning opportunities to actually uphold the values of the district that we are committed to upholding.
So we are operating these programs so that we are sustainable.
Okay.
So we are not taking any dollars out of our K to 12 system in order to support our early learning programming. It is self-sustainable, and in fact, we're doing well enough that we can grow it. And in certain situations, like the seamless day example I provided, there's even opportunities where some of that funding actually enhances our K to 12. So I think that answers some of your question. Yeah.
We're building capacity right
Yeah,
now.
and we're not losing money, and we're supporting lots of families. But of course, it's always great if we have more. Right? Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Trustee Bondar.
Thank you. Thank you so much for this presentation. That was so awesome. I love seeing the 90-day updates, and it's clear that a lot is happening already. I especially love how there's that potential for cohort data for next year. That'll be a really lovely comparison. I was just wondering, in following up on the fact that we do have the before school programs happening now, I was just curious about Strong Start. I mean, I know Strong Start is different from daycare in that it's like parent attended. Is there any changes to Strong Start now that we have these early spaces, or is that remaining the same? Thank you.
So the Strong Starts are all remaining exactly the same. So no changes to Strong Start. They're going strong. Yeah, thanks.
Trustee Westerby.
I really appreciate the line of questioning that was just presented about the early learning programs. I'm just wondering if there's a way staff can give us further information about that funding, and just so we can delve a little deeper into what was just presented there, because I do think it's really important that we know the depth of what was just discussed, because it's very important stuff. Yeah, I think we'll just leave it there. Thanks.
All right, not seeing any further questions, we're going to move on to 2.1, which is the public budget presentation. This is Secretary Treasurer.
Right. So I'm joined in presenting the budget to you tonight by the Assistant Secretary Treasurer, Mr. Mark Friesen. We'll be trading off throughout, so hopefully this will be fairly seamless.
Sorry, I just want to interrupt for 1 second. I just want, for the public, we have added a public participation period that's specifically for the budget right after the public budget presentation. So if any questions come up during this, jot them down like to yourself so you remember, and you'll have an opportunity to ask questions right after the whole presentation is done.
Very difficult to hear. Oh, can you speak up into the mic?
Okay.
Okay, Secretary Treasurer, project.
That's good.
How's that?
Go ahead.
Didn't say enough. All right, so tonight I just indicated that Mr. Mark Friesen, Assistant Secretary Treasurer, was joining me in the presentation.
We can't hear. We can't ask questions if we can't hear you speak. I can hear you.
Sorry, it's we're doing our best. We're the board. This is a meeting for the board. I'm really sorry if there are people with any kind of hearing challenges. We're trying. We have a mic. The Secretary Treasurer is trying to speak up, so you'll have to do your best. Sorry.
All right. Well, let's move on then. So tonight we're bringing a high-level presentation to you on the budget. We're going to talk through the core building blocks in putting a budget together. So things like assumptions, guiding principles, and rationales. And then at the next meeting, we'll be bringing you the actual numbers that come out once we put all of this together. So you can sort of see the agenda there. We'll move to the guiding principles. The way we put the budget together is pretty well described in Policy 610, which we'll be talking a little bit about later on in the policy section. It's got two key parts. One is we establish a plan, and this is in the policy, you can see it yourself. I'm just sort of reiterating and summarizing here. We establish a plan that allocates resources to the operating needs of the district, supports the strategic plan, and supports the long-range plans of the district. Those three things are important governance aspects of the board. So that's why the board directs us to pursue those, and we need to report back to the board on those. And the board also asks that we consult with the community to get input, and we have a couple of mechanisms for that. A little bit of input tonight. We do put a form out on the web, and we have a budget committee that meets quite regularly. I don't even know how many times, 5 times a year. There we go. So what is the board's,
The flowers.
what is the board's role in the budget? And I just talked a little bit to this, but it's adhering, and this is the governance role, right? Adhering to policy and legislation, so if it's in the Schools Act or other provincial guidelines and legislation, aligning the budget decisions with the strategic plan, which is the board's way of telling us, the strategic plan is the board's way of telling us what the goals and vision for the district are. So obviously we want to dedicate resources in that direction. The board should understand the budget situation, and that's a high level thing. You should understand if we're in deficit or we're in surplus or we're using resources that really should be used in the future or not using enough resources and not having a plan for it. So that's the sort of the big picture. Consulting with the school community, which is actually, I believe, required under the Schools Act. Overseeing, planning and allocating the budget. Now that doesn't mean that the board takes up residence in the finance office for the duration of putting the budget together, but it does mean that the board can ask questions and want to know how we do that, which is why we bring assumptions to the board, because we are describing the process and the major assumptions in putting the budget together. I think there's one or two more, one more after this. This is the last one? Okay. And then determining, the board should always be looking with a view to the future. You should, you know, if you're governing an organisation, if you're governing your own household budget, for goodness sake, you need to make sure that you can afford to, you know, continue after the current year that you're in. What I want to emphasise as we talk through this list is, I didn't make this up, this came from BCSSA, that's the BCSTA, that's the BC School Trustees Association. It's actually straight out of their literature. As I mentioned, we do have a budget advisory committee. We have 2 members present of the 3 who are on that committee. Yes, and yes. I'm talking about board members. There are a few members in the audience who are on that committee, and we really do appreciate your input. And actually, we're having some very lively discussions, right? It's in fact, we're running past time a little bit on most of our meetings these days. So you will see, and you probably saw at the last budget committee meeting, that we are listening to what you're doing. We're providing more input on the things that you're asking questions about. And tweaking. So thank you very much for your input. Is this one you?
So as the Secretary Treasurer just said, we have a budget advisory committee, and we do listen to the feedback that we get from this group. And I've appreciated the last couple of meetings because we've delved into the budget, and we've gotten participation from, I think, every member at our table, including some of the student reps, which was really encouraging. So some of the feedback you can see there that the Budget Advisory Committee gave us when we presented these assumptions and data to them was that they wanted to see more information on our special purpose funds, which you will see tonight, specifically the Feeding Futures and childcare programs that are new to the district, more infographics, so you'll see less charts just of numbers and more fun graphics, so hopefully that'll be entertaining for you. Talking about our operating surplus, and there'll be a policy that we discuss later in the meeting. And then our funding allocations. And this really goes to the heart of this presentation. You know, what are the haves to haves for our districts? And I'll elaborate more in a few minutes. But if you think of a school district, what do you think of first for resourcing a school district? Well, you think of classroom teachers. So students show up, you're going to need a teacher. But there's a lot more to running a district and meeting the learning needs of our students than you know, just a very important classroom teacher. So how do we distinguish how to staff our classrooms versus what enhancements do we need to make to meet the diverse learning needs of all students? So when we talk about consultation, what does it look like in our district? You might think of consultation of having a town hall meeting where you throw around ideas and say, you know, we should increase this or do this or stop doing this. And we can have that when it comes to very specific initiatives. You know, we think of maybe a learning initiative or even a reconfiguration mechanism that we had a few years ago. But really consultation, when we're thinking of what is important to our district, it's really guided by our strategic plan, which, as many of you know, we have one currently that expires in 2025. And this really guides all our decision making, and it should be. We've put into the strategic plan what we as a community through consultation believe is important in this district. So keeping that in mind, through a lot of different interactions, partner group meetings, these committee meetings, classroom meetings, IEP meetings, school-based team meetings, this is where consultation happens, even if we're not calling it consultation. Ideas are percolating up and themes are being discovered such that they come to the leadership team to say, you know what, this is an initiative that really seems to be generating a lot of ideas, and there's a need here. We're looking at data, and so these initiatives are coming to the forefront. And you can imagine little lines between all these different partner groups of interactions, and ultimately through input, preparation, review, the budget is approved, and we have the board purposely putting at the bottom because ultimately the board is responsible for approving the budget once all these strategic initiatives are brought through. So looking more formally at our timelines, so we are coming to you today on April 16th for the public budget presentation. And as our Secretary Treasurer mentioned, we'll come back in May and present the actual numbers. So today what we're presenting is assumptions, where we are year to date in government announcements, in looking at our inflation data and a number of other enrollment assumptions. And we'll put all these numbers together and bring back a formal budget in May. And so as we were talking about strategic initiatives, if we look at our budget twice a year, so right now we're following the bottom stream in our preliminary thinking of next year. And we have a November to February timeframe where we say we're gathering the information, but really we're gathering the information 1, 2, 3 years ahead of time as we think about where do we want to go in the future. And as we've discussed, you know, the board should be looking to the future as what we're doing. So really November to February, we're collating the ideas that we want to put forward into next year. And then and now in March and April, we're starting to get some of these funding announcements. We're looking at enrollment projections. We're getting a bit more specific. In May and June, we get even more specific where we actually present a budget to the board.
All right, so back to me. I'm now going to provide just a little bit of context, background behind the budget. So when we talk about the budget, we talk about basically a financial document that has 3 budgets in it and then 1 combined. So we add all 3 of those. What most people in this room are probably interested in is the operating budget, because that's where most of the business of the district happens. That's the day-to-day instruction, student supports, administration, transportation, custodial, you know, maintenance, all the nuts and bolts. Some parts of instruction are actually funded through the special purpose funds. The difference between the special purpose funds and operating budget is the special purpose funds are funds that are specifically targeted. We need to track that they are spent on the thing that we are given them for. They also are generally time limited. So if you don't use them, maybe you have to give them back. Not always, or you won't actually be fully funded for them in the first place. You have to submit and then be reimbursed for them. So they're much more specific, much more prescriptive types of funds. And we'll show you some examples of that later, but the bulk of tonight's presentation will actually focus on the operating budget. So everything after this slide will be the operating budget. Just want to touch on capital before we leave this slide. We'll also talk about, I think it's the very last slide in the deck. We'll talk a little bit about the capital budget. And for me, that's always the most tangible one. That's the one that you can see, touch and feel. It's, you know, it's the buildings, it's the vehicles. And the vast majority of that is actually, well, actually the vast majority of everything, but the vast majority of that is funded by the ministry. So from here on in until we tell you otherwise, we're on the operating fund. And now I'm going to give you a little bit of context about the operating fund. So most of that is funded by operating grant from the province. And I would say the majority of the operating grant comes on a per pupil basis, which is important later on. So you can see there are a few other small funding sources, and we've listed them below. There's tuition, and that's from international students. We get some funding for First Nations, which actually we'll provide a little bit more information on before, because I think that's something we can do a better job on sharing information. And there's other revenue, which is things like interest and rebates and rental revenue, where Mark's left the room now, but they're sort of the key things in there. It's everything else. Our bus fees are also in there. So the next slide is about the actual spending by the district. This slide is, I made a note because I want to get this right this time. I've had some questions on this one that helped me inform how to present it. It shows the spending of the district by function. So the functions are instruction, operations and maintenance, district admin and transportation. That's important because the next slide also shows by function, but it shows it compared to other districts. The difference is this slide actually shows the dollars, and it shows instruction broken up into the objects within instruction. So you can see that in instruction, we're paying teacher salaries, we're paying education assistant salaries, we're paying services and supplies, right? So you can see all the, what we call in accounting, the objects that go into instruction. And of course, the vast majority of the spending is instruction. Should have said that. So there's those categories again: instruction, district admin, operations and maintenance, and transportation. Now what I'm doing is I'm comparing our district, like I said, I'm doing context here, with other like-sized districts. And I added Abbotsford because they're nearby. I've ordered it according to instruction. So you can see, you know, obviously the province is not in the right order, but everybody else, it goes from the lowest percentage on instruction for Prince George down there at 79.5 to the highest percentage on instruction, Maple Ridge, Pitt Meadows at 86.5. And we are back bang smack in the middle of the pack on this one. So it's some interesting context. There's a few things that are kind of notable. I think the one we always point out, although, you know, in magnitude, maybe it's not so huge, but our transportation is 2.4%, which is kind of nearing the top of the pack. The districts that are much smaller, North Van, Delta, Maple Ridge, Pitt Meadows, don't bus people off Promontory. So we actually have a reason that we need to bus a lot of kids from a certain neighbourhood. And they have public transportation networks. They have BC Transit much more readily available. And of course, if we're spending more in one area and we're not spending less in instruction, you can see we're spending a little bit less on district admin. Although this year, I think we've done some work to bolster that a little bit. Oh, this is me. We switched it. That's right. Sorry. All right. So one of the questions that we got during our budget committee meeting, looking to see if the person who asked the question is here, was about special education. In fact, we actually got a series of questions on it, so I think this should help. This is information that is from our 22-23 year. I think that's important to note because it is a year out of date. But the reason I use that is because it's finished and it's been audited, and those are final numbers. And what you can see here is that within the operating grant that we get from the province, there is a category titled Special Education Supplement. So it's just it's a portion within that grant. And if you do the math, and actually it's on the province's webpage, you'll see that we got just over $25 million worth of revenue for students in those categories. Now, not all of those students are categorized into I'm not sure how to say this. I know Trustee Marshalls often references it, but it's those categories that don't get funded, right? So we say there's funding for special education students. Well, for a lot of students, there isn't. So that's, part of the rationale for what I'm about to say, because the next section of this diagram chart shows the expenses that we categorize for special education. These are not what would you call it, tagged to individual students, but we do actually, we have a teacher who is a resource teacher. That teacher is coded to special education. So there are some costs that are very specifically labelled and targeted, and we know those costs. And last year, the total of those costs was $28 million. So you can see that, and this is not unusual. I think most
I'm sorry, I need to interrupt. It's totally inappropriate to take pictures of audience members.
I was trying to take a picture of this.
Okay, well, maybe just, I don't know, it's gonna be online, maybe don't do that anymore. I could tell you were making someone else really uncomfortable.
All right.
These will be posted on the website.
Yeah, this whole presentation will be on the website, like all of the slides as a slide deck.
Okay. So the punchline here is the district, sort of the rest of the operating grant, we redirect $3 million to the support of special education.
Okay, so this was another area that we wanted to bring some clarity to, because sometimes there's some misunderstanding about how Indigenous education is funding, or how our Indigenous learners are supported. So there's a distinction between our local education agreement funding and supplemental grants. So, local education agreements are specifically with our bands, and they're to fund on-reserve students for the portion of the basic grant that would otherwise come through the province. So effectively, the province holds back funding for on-reserve students because they're funded through a federal grant that flows through the band and then ultimately to ourselves. So that's for our on-reserve students only. And then on top of that, we receive a supplemental grant, and this is for all our self-identified Indigenous learners, or most of them. There's some parameters where we can, how we claim those when we put forward a enrollment projection for our Indigenous learners. And so that is the supplemental funding, and what that's for is not to educate those specific learners for all their education. I mean, ultimately, diversity and inclusion means they're, a student is a student is a student. But what this is this is enhancements for providing additional supports to those students. So in this upcoming year, we're expecting about $4.8 million based on enrollment projections for that. And on the next slide, we just show how at the moment we are planning to spend that money. So you see the different categories there and the funding for that, and just some examples on the side. So a lot of it goes to teacher support. So you see enhancement teachers, grad coaches, mental health supports, Helka Malum. I just wanted to point out quickly the Helka Malum, we used to have more teachers through this, but we're finding that all our students, there's a wide variety of students, not just our Indigenous learners who want to take the Helka Malum. So that's becoming more of an enrolling course within the secondary schools. So what that means is that we don't have to use this targeted funding for that staff member. We can use our regular enrolling funding for that. So so that we can we can ultimately use this targeted funding for other supports. Yeah, go ahead. Okay, So I think now we're getting into some of the specific assumptions that we want to draw your attention to that we're using to build our budget this year. So this is a diagram of ultimately how we put the budget together, starting from the bottom and going up. You see the arrows flowing up. So ultimately what drives our budget is our enrollment. If kid shows up to school, ultimately the government will give us funding to educate those students. So we really have to start off with what our projected enrollment is, and our superintendent, along with the education team, looks at a lot of data, birth rates and things like that, to put forward a good estimate of projections of who is going to show up in September. Coupled with that, then the ministry announces to us what they would like to give us for an operating grant. So they put their own budget together, and about mid-March they give us an announcement of what that grant number per student will be. So that gives us our quantum, or our pot of money, if you so choose, in which to work with. And then on the other side, we have to look at what do we want to do for our staffing. On a base case, we say, okay, let's say for the sake of argument, if we have 25 kids, we're going to put a teacher in front of them. And so that's sort of our baseline, but there's a lot more to staffing our schools and staffing the district than just looking at that. But that's a starting point. And then our collective agreements for our unionized staff drive what we ultimately have to pay for salaries and benefits. So those are really the key components as we start, and then a lot of other components come beyond that. So we'll just run through some of the assumptions that we've come up with to date through this next couple of slides here. So for our enrollment, we have an enrollment projection increase of about 232 FTE, and you can see this trend since 2019. The cumulative increase in our district has been about 11%. It's sort of a good news story, because the more students we have, the more opportunities we have for enhancements, because there's economies of scale with larger school districts. Of course, that comes with its challenges, as many of you who are parents or have students in the district through other means know that our schools are full. Thankfully, the ministry has responded to our requests for building new schools and finding places to build. That's been a challenge, but we're very encouraged by that. So we've had a few growing pains, but I think overall the climate's positive. We're getting some new schools announced, here and there, and it's exciting to see them being built and accommodating our students in new learning spaces. So he's talking about the staffing ratios. We have language that sort of sets out a base of what our teacher ratios are, and probably the biggest significant change in the last few years for our teaching ratios has been the restored language that many of you know was a Supreme Court decision and is fully funded by the ministry on top of our per student grant. So which really brings our class sizes down. We have support ratios and admin ratios, and you can see an example of the min ratios on our website. But ultimately, it's not meant to be beholden. We're not beholden to a staff ratio. It's meant to be a starting point, and then we look at, okay, what do the schools need beyond what we're doing. So as I said, starting point, and there's other layers. So we might look at the school complexity. If it doesn't make sense for a split class, then we might have to add some more staffing. Or if we know that this school is going to grow within the year, we might have to add some, be proactive and add some staffing. Socioeconomic factors also play in. And then the big thing is, which is the bulk of this presentation, is strategic plan initiatives. So you might see more staffing going into schools because we're doing something deliberate through through a strategic initiative. And so this is just a snapshot of where we believe our composition of our staff is. So you see 50% of our staff is teachers, as you would expect, with another 25 being education assistants. So just out of interest, that's how our staffing lines up. this is getting a little bit technical now, but our wages and benefits, we're being funded, so this was the funding announcement that came out in March, we're being funded by 3.25% increase, and what this is a 1.5 or 1.25% increase that was delayed in being funded through the normal channels last year. It was funded last year, but it wasn't in this in the normal per student grant, and then another 2% wage increase that's part of the collective agreement increases. Our exempt staff is determined by a different set of means. It tries to follow what the unionized staff get, but it's not always the case, and it's not necessarily funded by the district, so that, or by the ministry, so that can always be a funding pressure. We're told that some of our exempt staff will be funded, but the ministry's kind of likes to keep information back. Maybe they have to look at their own budget before they're able to announce exactly whether things are going to be fully funded. So we're kind of in a wait and see, I believe, with our PVP group, whether their increases will be funded this year. Also, there was a cost of living adjustment that was put into the last round of collective bargaining, and that's because inflation was running amok, and basically the ministry didn't know in the next 3 years that the agreement was set for whether inflation would be tampered down or whether it would be still running high. So there was this to say, okay, if inflation is set at a certain place, then we'll allow a cost of living adjustment above and beyond the negotiated increase, in which case this year would have been 2%. So we just got the announcement a couple weeks ago after the funding was set, and they will fund another 1% increase, and we're waiting for the funding for that. Just that it's announced for now. So that will play into how we put our budget together in a few weeks. So this is just a summary of all the different types of grants. Our basic allocation is what every student receives, and then there's the different levels of special needs funding based on the severity of the students, or what they call the categories, level 1, 2, and 3. There's the English language learner supplement and the Indigenous supplement. So most of them are going out by about 3.4%. So that's in line with how our wages are being funded. So this just summarizes some of the things I've already said. So our enrollment increase, we're expecting a 232 FTE increase for next year, 3.4 increase for our funding, and then that's supposed to pay for a 3.25% collective bargaining increase. The benefit cost increase, unfortunately, and the inflation, those are things that seem to be running a bit ahead of the funding, so they're a bit higher than 3%, so that's going to put some pressure on our budget, so we're going to see what the impact is on that. And that sort of takes you over to the right-hand side. So inflation, and then operating new schools, salary obligations. So I've talked about all of these things. They're a little bit nebulous, and so we try and create a bit of flexibility in our budget to absorb some of these things, and we'll be talking about also our accumulated surplus, which acts as an ultimate buffer should something really go sideways on us. So some of the budget financial risks when we talk about things going sideways, some of the things that maybe not so horrendous are some things we look at are vacancy factors with our staff, our sick leave. Sick leave was high, obviously, during COVID. It's coming down a bit, but we're continuing to monitor that and making sure we're budget adequately for that. There's external factors, which I don't need to tell people about. These are real things when we talk about floods and pandemics. Of course, that affects our insurance costs. And then there's government things. Will we be fully funded for the expenses that we have and the increases that we have? And then there's district things. Will the enrollment come to fruition the way we expect? Are our budget estimates sound? We do a lot of rigor in looking at our estimates, looking at past trends. But there's always things that come up, new initiatives that we don't have a lot of background on, and we're making our best educated assumptions on these things. No, pass it over.
Thank you. Actually, this is my part.
Okay.
This is an integration of finance and education together. So there are a couple of slides, and this goes alignment with our strategic plan goals. And at the end of the day, part of the board's responsibility is to be able to fine tune their spending to make sure they can allocate resources to effectively implement the board's strategic goals that I implement. So there are 4 areas: literacy, human and social development, numeracy, and transitions. If you go to the next slide, please. So this was showed. If you look at the slide by itself, you can have the graphics that come right up. There are going to be 3 new support structures for the 24-25 school year. The previous ones were mentioned for the 23-24 school year, and that was part of the amended budget. The first one is something called Integrated Care Services, Elementary Mental Health Strategy, and then the Middle School Literacy Support Plan, and this is going to be effective the 24-25 school year. And so, again, this graphic coincides with our 90-day plan cycle. So each 90-day cycle, we have a 4 goal areas, so then the trustees have an understanding of how things are presented and how things are measured, and to be able to go back and reconcile, and then make a connection at a public budget presentation. So the 3 new initiatives have been highlighted under each. So under literacy, the middle school literacy support structure plan, and then under human and social, we have the integrated care services support, and then the elementary mental health strategy. I'm going to be talking bigger picture. This is a public budget meeting. I'm not going to go into specifics. And so just to be able to talk about, based on the budget assumptions, here's where we're leaning to. Members of the Board of Education have actually provided some context during the budget committee meeting to be able to provide some of the details. So the first one will be the literacy middle school intervention. As you know, at elementary and middle school, we have PM benchmark measurements around reading levels. And at middle school, through the data, it has been ascertained that there are kids who would really benefit from an extra level of support. As you know, Assistant School Superintendent David Manuel talked about the fact that we were bringing a report around the Early Literacy Collaboration Project and some data at our next 90-day cycle. This middle school literacy intervention model parallels that level of intervention. It is basically having a reading intervention specialist working with your learning assistance teacher as well as the classroom teacher. It is that collaborative approach to supporting students across the system. And so the goal would be is that additional staffing during the 24-25 school year will be bringing back as a notion of data, reading intervention efficacy surveys. Also the PM benchmark scores for middle school students every 6 weeks. Then also looking at long-term student achievement data, FSA literacy data, November 2024 and then November 2025. An assessment of comprehension and thinking, that's called the ACT. It's our local assessment. That information also will be provided back to the Board of Education to be able to talk about the efficacy around this strategy by itself, parallel to the Elementary Literacy Collaboration Project. Next slide, please. And this in a nutshell is around enhancing support structures when it comes to counseling time in elementary school. We all know the importance of intervention. Our existing model spans middle and elementary school. So the purpose is to reduce the counselor to student ratio at elementary schools, create a model that supports base counseling services at all of our schools, and that has also be super responsive in need compared to the existing model, focus on early intervention. Our success metrics will be overall big picture would be increased responsive access for students and families for counseling services at our schools, different from what we have currently. Increased student, family, and classroom teacher access to education support to school counselors. And one sort of segue would be, we talked about mental health strategies, and part of increased support structures might be is a mental health strategy through our school counseling support structures at elementary. The importance of that collectively starts at elementary, stems to middle, and then to secondary. So that'll be increasing our staffing in terms of counseling support services at elementary. Next slide, please. Thank you. The last one will be enhanced supports and intervention for students with exceptional needs and unique profiles. In general, we also know there are kids who are not able to manage and to be safe in a school setting. In general, there are also students that have externalizing behaviors and communication challenges, could be physical, and those students require additional supports. So this plan talks about the fact that we're going to be looking at increasing support structures. This integrated care service, if you look at the typical intervention, we have classroom supports by the classroom teacher. We may have a pull-up program, which may refer to as a tier 2 intervention, and that is during the day at some point as the need arises. There might be a unique pull-up program within a school. You may refer that to as a tier 3 intervention. But then there are kids who are unable to be able to manage estates in a school during the school day. And the notion is, how do we find ways of supporting kids in our schools during the instructional day, some specialized supports? There's a bit of a linkage to this. The Minister of Education also has talked about, and they've, part of their strategy would be something called the BC's Integrated Child and Youth Teams. We don't have that. We're always hoping, and we also drop lots of hints to the ministry. You may get one, but that support structure will complement our existing plan for enhancing supports for students for starting in September. So this also will yield additional staffing, and realistically, at the end of the day, if you're looking at the data sets that you would like to have access to for the Board of Education to ensure that this strategy is meeting the goal level, number of students and families accessing the services, a decrease in the number of students on part-time programs if they are, and the next one would be a decrease in the number of student incident reports at the school level by itself. And again, we also always get stories and qualitative data from students and families, and that is really important. That's my update, and the next slide is just a summary of all of this, of all of the areas of need that we talked about back in amended budget, and then also talked about what's going to be happening for September 24-25. Over to you, Secretary Treasurer.
Thanks, Superintendent. So just to recap, what we've covered so far is, the overall way we're putting the budget together, the assumptions, some context, and then some strategic plan linkages. In terms of budget tonight, I'm just going to highlight one thing, which is the accumulated surplus policy. And the reason that I'm highlighting this is because I am going to be bringing a recommended change in this policy during the policy section. The change is driven principally by changes that have been made at the ministry level. And indeed, the ministry actually reviewed the policy and approved it. So part of our process of doing this has actually been getting ministry approval. It is a little bit more reporting on our part. It's much clearer reporting, I believe, to the board, and I'll share that with you when we talk about the policy later on. For the moment, just a little bit of context to say that the surplus allocations are supposed to be identified, which we have been identifying them, but not in a great deal of context, and that the goal is to maintain a contingency reserve of 3.5% of annual operating expenses, and that's really the two main components that are in the current policy. What we will bring back next time, the next steps, is to use these assumptions and the strategic program changes that we just talked through to build the draft budget for 24-25, develop, continue to test our assumptions and use them to build a 3-year, multi-year financial plan, which is a new requirement of the ministry as of last year, and then bring it to this forum. So the last thing that we promised we'd do would be to come back to those other two funds. So we're going to do that right now.
Okay, so we're going to start with the special purpose funds. And there's just a listing of a number of the key funds that we're involved with outside of our operating funds. And these are effectively things that supplement the work that we do in the district. So a large part of it is talking about our early learning and childcare. And I think over time we'll see a lot of that funding morph into our operating fund because now we are the Ministry of Education and Childcare, but for now they're run as special purpose funds, so standalone. And what's good about that is is that we can see how that those programs are sustainable, and we're not having to at this point supplement them with the K-12 funding. And another large fund in here, of course, is our classroom enhancement fund. You know, and that's been going on for a while. So overall, these funds are getting close to $30 million. So they're like a little mini school district, if you will. And there's some school districts in our province that don't even have a $28 million budget. So this is above and beyond our operating fund that we manage these resources as well. So we just wanted to highlight a couple of the new ones that that might be of interest to the board. One is our childcare initiatives, and we've already heard a 90-day update on this. We are growing this. We're getting more sites. We can't say specifically because some of them are still embargoed with the ministry, but more to come on these things, and really exciting work to be done. And our Strong Start and Ready, Set, Learn programs that have been around for many years are continuing to flourish alongside these new initiatives. And we'll pass it back to the STF for the Feeding Future.
Yeah, so another new fund that has a specific purpose and has been flowing through special purpose fund is Feeding Futures initiative. It was new last year, and we've been guaranteed funding for 3 years, so it'll be happening next year, although we don't know how much we're getting yet. What we've done this year is we've managed to extend a healthy lunch to approximately 1,000 students. Now, some questions came up during budget committee, and we do offer that program through 2 of our high schools, through the actual kitchens at those 2 schools. And then the remainder of the schools are supported principally by Bowls of Hope. We do have a fledgling, so it's getting its wings, breakfast program. And we're trying, you know, we did a lot of research earlier in the year to assess all the different programs that were out there and bring a little bit more consistency, bring some programs up and support some where they were. We've supported and expanded the healthy fruit and vegetables and milk programs, and actually the provincial government is doing some work to bring that under the umbrella of Feeding Futures next year. So I guess we were moving in the right direction on that one. Little did we know. And we've purchased some equipment, and we're very grateful to the ministry. We actually submitted quite a lot of applications for funding, including for a refrigerated truck, which, due to hold-ups in vehicles, which many of us have probably experienced, we haven't received yet, but it will be extremely beneficial to have our own truck to start transporting food around the district. So the last fund that I want to talk about is a little bit more of the provincial funding for capital this time. If you've driven around the district recently or looked at the newspaper, you've probably seen that we have 2 big construction programs going on right now. We're building a new East Side Elementary, which I'm new to the district, but I gather it's on the site of the old, what was it? Rosedale, it was elementary, yep. It's a fairly small site, so it had to be an elementary. And then we're doing an extension to Sardis Secondary. And in fact, we started earthworks there over the break and are starting to work on a new bus loop. And you'll see a lot more happening in both of those over the summer. We also receive what they call minor capital funding for, you know, a lot of improvements that we need to do throughout the district, and some examples are listed here. I don't know that I necessarily need to go through it. And then there are some items of capital that are not funded by the ministry, but we need them. We need our maintenance folks and electricians and plumbers to have trucks and carry around their supplies and go from school to school. We buy those pieces of equipment. You'll see that when we bring the budget. That's a transfer of local capital from the operating fund down to capital. That's how we pay for that sort of stuff. So I think that's everything we've got, and I think we're doing, yeah.
So first of all, before we go to the public participation period regarding the public budget presentation, trustees, does anyone have any questions? I know we have seen this previously, but does anyone have any new questions? Trustees.
Thank you, Chair. A comment and a question. First, I just want to, I don't know that I've said it enough, but I really appreciate the efforts to align the strategic plan with the budget priorities. I think it really indicates where there are deliberate decisions in terms of how the district is making choices. And for me, at least, it really lends values to these presentations. So my appreciation to staff on that count. This has been asked and answered, but to me, it's a really important feature of this presentation. Our projected enrollment is set to increase by 232 students. Obviously, it could be more. It's 270 plus students at the elementary age. I just want to be sure our schools, our portables currently in use, and the expectation of capital projects be completed in the next few years. We're not budgeting for any purchase of portables or anything like that in this year, are we?
I can answer. Thank you. Yeah, we do have space, and I think we've looked at the number of students transitioning in and transitioning out, so we can actually manage the enrollment increase.
Thank you.
Trustee Reed.
Yes, thank you so much for all of this. It's fantastic. It's probably the easiest to connect the dots that I've seen so far setting up this table, so thank you to everybody involved. I would just like to comment that I'm appreciative that we were taking the advance on some of those feeding futures and produce initiatives. I've heard a lot of talk through food security and different community avenues that the shifting of those funds is actually causing havoc in some places where maybe it wasn't as anticipated. So I just love seeing that that's something that we projected for and that we're already working like we're ahead of. So I would just like to put my hands up for that one. Thank you so much.
Before we move on to public questions, I just want to say thank you for doing the part of the presentation that is, these are our needs and this is where we're spending extra money. Because as everyone in this room knows, since I first became a trustee, I've been saying I don't understand where the money we have control over gets spent. And so now I do. So that's very good. Thank you very much. Really appreciate it. Are there any more questions, trustees? Okay, seeing none, we are allowing an extra public participation period of 15 minutes in addition to the regular public participation periods that we normally have, that's specifically on the public budget presentation. The same rules apply as normal. When you come to the mic, you do need to identify yourself by first and last name, say your relationship to the district. You're not going to call anyone out by name. Or you need to talk only about the public budget presentation in your comment or question. This is not the actual public budget, so it's not like individual line items. So if you ask a question about that, no one's going to have an answer for you because that was not what was presented tonight. So that being said, come to the mic if you have questions about the public budget presentation.
There we go. Thanks, everyone. My name is Tracy O'Hara. I am the president of QP 411, and I'm a clerical worker in the district for 25 years now. So thank you very much. I've sat on the budget committee for a couple of years now, and we have had some good, lively conversation this past year, and I've really enjoyed it. So thank you very much to our Secretary Treasurer and to our Assistant Secretary Treasurer for putting this together. Just a couple things I wanted to touch on because I think it's important. I heard Mr. Friesen say ratios are not meant to be a starting point. We're not beholden to these numbers, so I would really appreciate consideration being given for next year, especially when it comes to our clerical staffing ratios, please. My clerical members are being buried under workloads that are, in my opinion, unreasonable. Our clerical staffing ratios end at 1,200 for the high schools, and all three high schools. 3 of the high schools, I think, are burgeoning around 1,500 kids. So important to me, and I would be remiss to not mention it. We'll be looking closely at the integrated care services to see how that unfolds next year, because as we know, we've got some significant challenges in a lot of our schools. So I'm not going to go into that, but I will be looking at that. And also wanted to quickly mention our child care initiative. And I'm super pleased with what we're doing here in Chilliwack. I think we've got some good traction, and Ms. Driscoll is doing a fantastic job in overseeing that program and really working with the union to try and create whole jobs for people. So many of our EAs they can't survive on their 5.5 hours a day. They're able to pick up some extra time at these before and after school programs, and they can have whole jobs because of it. So, we're looking at bringing on some new schools next year. I hope hope we can keep those in-house. I think there's real value there when it comes to recruitment, retention, and just being able to have a living wage for a lot of our people. So thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Tracy. I know you were trying, you were like within seconds of your time. That's awesome. But if you do have anything else to say, and there's still time at the end, you're welcome to come up, and you could also talk about the public budget at our other public participation period if you still have thoughts.
Hi, I'm Katie Bartelt. I'm the chair of DPAC. In partnership with CTA, who could not be here today, we have a question about how will the implementation of the Jackson Award impact the overall budget, in particular the Classroom Enhancement Fund, and how has that been taken into account?
Secretary Treasurer, can you answer that?
Yeah, I believe we're in the process of reviewing the effect of it, and I think we're doing it with CTA. I'm not 100% sure, but I don't believe it's got impacts for this year's budget. It's more the following year's budget.
Can I ask a follow-up just to clarify? Is the Jackson decision actually impacting the amount of money we get, or just impacting where we have to spend it?
Class composition.
What is it? Does it change the funding?
No, it does not.
Okay, that's what I thought.
Yeah, it's not impacting the funding, but I'm just curious as to how there's going to be more need in the classrooms if you're counting 30 kids with needs versus counting 28 kids with needs. So I'm a little concerned.
Okay. Yes, go ahead.
Hello, my name is Darren Ollinger. Regarding the budget, the operating budget in particular, being spent on the function of instruction and the roles of the teachers involved, specifically with regard to the strategic plan and initiatives of accessibility to all students and with a curriculum. Now, as far as the taxing the teachers is concerned in their pay rate, to accommodate all of the students, I was wondering, using the bell curve of the students who are challenged, average, or enriched, if there's a segregation and the class sizes involved in the segregation, that would be accommodated by the special education supplement or the special purpose funding for integrated care service tiers 1, 2, and 3. Are those tiers the distribution on the bell curve for the special needs students, whether they're low achievers or high achievers, or where's this special purpose funding being directed to?
I think that was probably to the superintendent, but can I just clarify your question before I think what I'm understanding is that you're asking, so we get a certain amount of funding for all students, and then the tiers are on top of that. We don't have segregation of students in the classroom. I'm going to pass it to the secretary.
Then one teacher has to accommodate the spectrum from each extreme in one classroom with a given curriculum, rather than accommodating their needs specifically, but rather than generally.
Who wants to? Do you want to answer?
So I don't think you've asked a question before.
Oh, sorry, you need to press your button.
I should say this in a positive way, but I'm not sure that you've asked a question that has a simple 2-minute answer, right? I think we need to spend a little bit of time to unpack it. And I think the first thing that I'd say is there's a manual that describes how we identify whether students have special needs, and it's using a thing called the Diagnostic Statistics Manual. Am I right? DSM-IV? Is it IV still or V? IV? V? Okay, we're on to 5.
Discrimination of mental dispositions.
I think it's a lot broader than that. I am not
The DSM
a
fee,
psychologist, so I'm not even going to pretend to wade into those waters, but
I know what you're talking about.
right. And the DSM has nothing to do with bell curves. It's
Yeah, I was just wondering how the special purpose money was spent, whether it's being directed to students of higher need than the average student. That basically is my question in a nutshell.
yeah. Perhaps we could talk outside the meeting.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
We can give you
Thank you.
contact information and you can maybe send an email and then get some more specific answers. So you need to press your button. Identify yourself before you speak.
Linda Diarmani, I'm taxpayer. When menstrual products were first brought into boys and girls bathrooms, it was estimated that it was $35,000 for machines and $5,000 for product. However, it turned out that it was $80,000 for machines and $40,000 for product, a 700% increase in product and over 100% increase in installation, $120,000 for non-educational needs. Where did the difference in estimated and real costs come from in the educational budget?
Secretary Treasurer, do you want to speak to that?
So tonight we're focused on the 24-25 budget. And it sounds like you're looking for some discussion of past transactions. So I'm not prepared to answer that question tonight. Thank you.
You need to push your button. You need to push your button.
It says that you were going to increase your non-exempt staff. Because what was the planned increase? So you said, yes. Non-exempt staff. You said that it was lower in here, but you had planned to increase that.
Linda, push your button again.
So you're talking about the section of the presentation where it had context, and I was talking about other districts, and Chilliwack was at 2.9%. I have to look at the slide. Oh, wow. And is this correct?
Yeah, and then you said that you had planned on
Correct.
there were going to be extra increases in that budget.
Correct. And I probably should have spoken historically a little bit on that, but most of the change is prospective. When we did the amended budget in January, February, we brought forward some recommended changes, many of which we're still in the process of implementing. So, for instance, the district has grown substantially, and we had not added a payroll clerk since before the year 2000.
So it's just a payroll clerk?
No, but that's an example of the kinds of the kinds of positions. So, we were adding to the administrative part of the district to support. So, yes, a payroll clerk actually is part of that increase, but there were a couple of them. Correct.
Do you know how much they're going to cost?
I haven't got that information in front of me.
Hi, Renee Schmidt, educator. Just on the budget, you're planning on doing more reading programs for middle school kids. So there's already, by middle school, isn't it kind of too late? They're reading in grade 2. So we have other programs in elementary school, correct? So by the time they get to middle school, they need to know how to read to do other work. So I'm just wondering if we can cap it earlier.
You had mentioned about the in-migration of students from other districts. If you could speak to that partly as one of the reasons.
So, in an ideal world, yes, all students in middle school would be able to be proficient readers, but what we find is that unfortunately we have a group of students that still are unable to read foundational levels, and so we have specialist teachers that are needed to do the intervention, targeted intervention with those kids. We've also done a bit of a study on our students, and what we found is that there's a high proportion of students that do come in as Trustee Richelt noted from other districts that are not reading as well. So the students that stay with us throughout their early primary years and into graduation tend to become quite proficient readers. But we have also have a group of students coming from outside that haven't had that early intervention that we're providing, and so we have an obligation to help students learn from wherever they're at. So that's why.
So would that maybe also fall into like English as a second language? Like, could it be that kind of? Because I could see reading there too. Another question. You were gonna hire more support for Indigenous education. Would that be more, maybe Indigenous education assistance, or like, if they call in sick at work, they don't seem to get replaced. So, to replace them, could another education assistant just do it, like just for like the day or whatever? Like, I'm just wondering where those educators are coming in.
If,
I mean,
I think you're doing more.
if anyone has a
I can respond
yeah,
to that.
you might as well. Yeah.
So yeah, we are looking to replace, and as, and probably in another slide, we could show how our numbers have increased, so more staff are required to support them. In terms of having people take on different roles, we don't do that, because if someone's hired into a position, we try to replace that person for that position.
Hi there. My name is Judy Chalmer, and I just have a quick question about the literacy program. You talked about hiring reading specialists. I'm just wondering what kind of specialists they are. Do they have OG reading credentials? Like, what makes them specialists in reading?
Yes, so the middle school teachers we're speaking of are trained in early literacy, so they'll in foundational reading skills, so phonics, phonological awareness, phonemic awareness, word work, and decoding strategies. So and it's a skill set that we don't see often in our middle and secondary school teachers. So that's why we need to hire specialist reading teachers for middle school to help students that are struggling with foundational skills.
So these people
Push your
that,
button. Oh, you.
yeah. So these people that will be hired, I mean, the basic. There's no specialized, like, we have kids who have dyslexia, and they will not learn in the typical ways that typical kids learn. And I've just seen over and over again that we bring in these specialists. I'm not talking about this district, to be fair, from my experience, we bring in specialists, but they're still trying to teach the kids in the same ways that the teachers are teaching the kids, and the kids aren't learning. So I'm hopeful that when you're hiring reading specialists, they're actually reading specialists. They actually have more training so that they can help the kids who struggle. I mean, kids that can read, it's easy to teach them to read. We can't expect kids that can't read to learn the same way kids can learn to read. But so I'm just saying, from my experience, I've seen this over and over and over again. We bring in reading specialists, and they're doing nothing different from what is happening in the classroom, only that it's happening one-on-one. And it's not making the difference that it should be making. So I'm hopeful that when you're looking at reading specialists, you're hiring people that are actual reading specialists.
So, and I can speak to that. We actually are running this as a pilot program right now at AD Rundle and at CMS. And so we're just looking to expand the work those teachers are doing, and they are having impact. So, yeah, thank you.
Okay, that's all the time we have for this special public participation period on the budget presentation. It is, has been an hour and a half, and everyone needs a little break. So we're gonna do 10-minute break, so break till 7:10. Recess. meeting back to order. We're on to information items. 4.1 is Budget Advisory Committee report. This is, I believe, Trustee Swanky.
Thank you, chairs. Brief report for you. The committee convened on April 4th. Those minutes are before you. I'd like to acknowledge and thank the committee members, echoing the comments of the Secretary Treasurer and the finance team. The committee will reconvene on May 9th to review the proposed budget before it comes to the board on May 14th. I appreciate the time, and any questions are welcome.
Does anyone have any questions? All right, I don't see any. So we're moving on to 4.2 is trustee written reports. They're in the package if you want to take a look. 4.3 is BCSTA report. Trustee Reed.
Yes, thank you very much. As you are all aware, we have AGM this week, so there's not a ton to report on in advance of that, but a few things to just point out. As Trustee Swanky pointed out in an email to us, we do have a branch meeting on Friday morning at AGM. Provincial Council's on Friday. The agenda for that and the discussed motions are in the on the portal in the package. They're pretty standard, but if you want to take a look at them, if there's any questions that you want me to bring forward, a reminder to download the app. The controversial naming, Hova Hova, we're unsure. It does have the agenda. You can contact staff directly. Every year they announce it differently on stage every year, so I'm not sure. The latest email has information on parking, Wi-Fi, voting, and such. And just a reminder that you will need a charged device to vote when we're at AGM, so make sure you're charge. And the very last thing is that there is a student voice, Truth from Zoomers, Indigenous Urban Youth Student Panel at AGM. And if you check one of those emails, you can submit your questions until tomorrow for those students if you want to have them engage with your questions. So that's all I wanted to share with you for now.
Excellent. Trustees, are there any questions about the BCSTA report? Oh, Trustee Bonner.
I guess I would just ask, is there information on how we would submit a question if we came up with one for the panel members?
Yes, absolutely. There's in one of the BCSTA weekly update emails, there's a link and it says submit here, click.
Okay, so we are on to item number 5, which is public participation, comments or questions concerning the agenda. So this is our regular public participation period. Same rules as always. State your name in relation to the district. Your comment or question must be related to an agenda item, and be respectful, basic.
Yes, good afternoon. My name is Dr. Ferguson, a grandparent in the community. I'd like to refer to the superintendent's review, since it's on the agenda, and of course we're getting there, so it's hard to ask a question since it's there. But I would like to ask a question that has to do with point 9, communication and community relations, if I could address this to the superintendent. According to point 9.1, the superintendent should establish and maintain good relations with students, parents, caregivers, community members, and organizations. So I'm unaware of how this happens in the community, so I'd like to ask the superintendent in regards to a previous report in which he stated that they would possibly withhold information from parents about transitioning children in the district.
What's your point of order, Trustee Reed?
Parents.
We're not actually connecting.
Excuse me. Point of order. We had a point of order, so we paused.
Apologies.
In Robert's Rules of Order, we pause when there's a point of order called. That is the rules.
I have been muted so many times here.
Because you're always out of order.
We're not conducting a review of.
Oh, I shut your mic.
No worries. The item on the agenda is not that we are conducting a review of the superintendent. It's not our place to review staff in front of the community at this point. We're discussing the policy and the procedure that we're going to use to review him, and we will make those results public.
Thank you. I uphold your point of order. The question is out of order.
Irrelevant.
trustees on the board. I was wondering if these changes are going to help to make that more fair.
The new policy is in the package. You're welcome to read it in full. There's a policy on the code of conduct and a policy on how to address breaches of the code of conduct.
Is that for us? How we can breach your breach of conduct?
There's
of
no
the
such
codes of
thing as a
conduct?
member of the public addressing a breach of the code of conduct. The code of conduct is the trustees policing ourselves.
Okay, so if you breach your own code of conduct, it's between you. Is that what you're trying to tell me?
That is correct. It's up to
So it doesn't
the
matter
trustees
whether,
to decide whether they feel that each other have upheld the code of conduct.
so you can just bully them anytime you want. I get it, because I noticed that the school district is really good at that. Thank you.
Okay, not seeing, oh wait, we do have another one.
Hello, Deirdre O'Connor, DPAC executive and parent in the district. I just had some questions regarding the public presentation on the budget and also a comment. Thank you to everyone that put that together. It was beautiful, and I know that it takes a lot of work, and I've seen it from the inside, so I'm very appreciative of everybody that was on that. A couple of really quick questions. I got lots of notes, but I did see that we had some money that was put back into the Student and Family Affordability Fund earlier in the month. That was an injection that I hadn't thought we were going to be getting. It was $20 million, and $345,000 of that came to Chilliwack. Is that included in these numbers? That's a question through the chair to the Secretary Treasurer, I believe. That was one question. There is some mention of inflation costs being higher than we thought. That was, I believe, in cap spending. I know in previous years, the trustees and the district have lobbied to the government to try and get those increased. Is that something that an avenue that we are pursuing this year? That was another question. And a question through the chair to our superintendent. Thank you for connecting those dots to the education side of things. Part of the presentation that piqued my interest was on the counseling aspect through the elementary. I know personally my daughter has struggled with accessing those services, though. I know that we had some staffing issues with hiring counselors, and I'm wondering if that is something that's being addressed and if there's an action plan in place for both attracting and retaining not only those types of positions, but other positions as far as EAs, teachers, and all of the things. And I think my time is up.
Thank you. So the Secretary,
I tried to cram it all in.
Yes, that was great. Secretary Treasurer, you have the one about the extra funding that came to 340-ish thousand, and then Superintendent, you can answer the other.
Oh, sorry,
Okay, thank you.
Oh, now I'm pressing buttons. Okay.
Hi, thanks for the questions too. The additional money that came through was actually for this budget year. I don't think it was 340,000. I can't actually remember what it was, but it's in this budget year, and we're trying to figure out ways to spend it. And then your second question was about inflation, which I think is probably more directed to the chair. Like in terms of are we doing lobbying?
Oh, yeah, so we have written a letter in the past, and the BCSTA has also basically written letters asking for the government to consistently fund like inflationary costs. I'm not opposed to doing that again. We are going to AGM. There may even be a motion about that at AGM this year. And we also aren't quite sure what the impact is on the budget yet because we don't have those numbers. So keep you posted, I guess is the answer to that one.
And let me just talk about the staffing piece, and I think you were talking about the elementary counseling components. Yes. The notion is around creating full-time jobs, and again, counselors would have fewer schools to work with, which would mean that in the past they would have be stretched on multiple schools at middle and secondary. So there's a greater propensity for us to be able to fill those positions. And collectively, I think when it comes to staffing, when it comes to EAs and teachers, I'm going to say Chilliwack is doing quite well with our strategies in recruiting. We've got a great HR team that is relentless, and so my notion is just that compared to my feedback I received from my Fraser Valley colleagues.
My name is Dr. Ferguson. I have a question regarding the code of conduct. Point number 28. Uphold all sections of the code of conduct when posting to social media or engaging in public communication. When will trustees on this board face that code because of their offensive, bigoted comments on the social media posts? 2 female trustees post anti-Christian comments, memes. How does that square with this?
Yes, what's your point of order?
It's extremely uncalled for and inappropriate to refer to a male colleague as a female trustee. That is not within, sorry.
I uphold your point of order. I actually should have clocked that, but I thought the speaker was talking about Karen and I. Sorry. I haven't posted anything, but just
Also,
assuming based on the source. But yes, I uphold your point.
The information you're requesting is in the package, but we're not discussing the actual code of conduct. We're discussing the policies and procedures.
Yes, thank you, Trustee Reed. I was also going to tell the speaker that they were out of order because this is not a discussion about past conduct of trustees. It's about the policy that is in the
Yes,
packet.
but I want to highlight the policy since it's just been renewed. And by the way, your point is an
Okay, you are expelled from this meeting. You will leave this room right now. I'm going to shut off this recording and you are not allowed to be in this room right now. I'm calling this meeting back to order. I don't feel like I can proceed without saying, as the chair, that there's zero tolerance for hate speech at this board table, and that will never be allowed. And if anyone else thinks they're going to get up here and make some disgusting transphobic remarks, to stop this meeting again, you'll also get expelled. So I'm hopeful that there's no one else in this room that would do such a thing, because that was the worst thing I've heard in all my years as a trustee in this room. So let's proceed. Okay, so we are moving on to 6.1 capital plan bylaw. Secretary Treasurer, right?
What you have in front of you tonight is a resolution to for the board to provide approval to spend money on capital items that have been funded by the provincial government. So every June we send a request to the province to say, these are this is our wish list, and around about March they send us back a letter telling us what has and hasn't been approved, and that's actually attached to the agenda as well. You'll see the full letter. So once we get that, the board needs to approve this, that we can spend that money, and the province will send it to us.
All right. So do we need to say anything else? Yes, go ahead.
Thank you, Chair. Quick question. There is funding for a new bus. Last year we had to top off the funding of buses. I just wondered, are we expecting these to be fully funded this time around?
Yeah, that's an excellent question. I actually have happy news. This year the province is fully funding bus purchases. Unfortunately, 3 were last year and 1 is this year. So,
Right. Any other questions? Oh, sure. Just Trustee Moss, did you have a question before the motion?
Yes, I have a question. My question is, so the bullet point that says carbon neutral capital program, what does that mean?
So essentially, there are upgrades to some facilities, particularly HVAC units, that, if you put a heat pump in, you can save on the amount of electricity or energy that you would use for heating a space. You can put in LED lights and you'll save, electricity. You can put in double glazed or, triple glazed or whatever windows, and you can save in electricity. So it's all sorts of initiatives like that. I think for us it actually is primarily HVAC style units.
And so what kind of a number are you thinking of for all of those initiatives?
For the HVAC?
Well, yeah, for that bullet point and whatever it is, HVAC and windows and. Oh, I see. Oh, yes. Okay. Where?
Right there. Somewhere in this section it'll say CNCP right up the top there. There we go. So they're the project. They're not coming.
So it's Better Middle and
they're the projects that
East Chilliwack
we requested and got funded for.
Oh, I see. Okay.
Okay, trustees, so I know some of us are still newer than others, so this is a bylaw, so there literally would be no point in doing this over 3 readings, but we have to do 3 readings of it because that's just the way bylaws work. So we have to have a motion to do all 3 readings tonight, and then a second motion to approve all 3 readings. So it's 2 motions. First one is to do all 3 readings. In order to do all 3 readings in one night, you have to have unanimous consent of the trustees present. So please vote for this, because otherwise we can't spend this money. That's already being allotted. Yes.
Thank you, Chair. I would move that the Board of Education. Thank you. I would move that the Board of Education approve 3 readings of capital project bylaw number 2024-25 CPSD 33-01 at the April 16th, 2024 regular board meeting.
Thank you. Is there a seconder? Trustee Spanky?
Thank you. I am cautious about doing 3 readings in a single evening. In this case, this is funding from the ministry. This basically releases it and allowed the work to move forward. The merits of this motion is to seek unanimous consent because that's necessary for us to do that. So hopefully that addresses the considerations of colleagues.
Okay, I'm not seeing anyone else wanting to comment on this first motion, so all those in favor of approving 3 readings of the capital project bylaw this evening? That's unanimous. Thank you, trustees. Okay, then we need to do a motion to do the readings.
Thank you, Chair. In that case, I would move that the Board of Education approve first, second, and third final reading of the capital project bylaw number 2425-CPSD 33-01 as attached.
Seconded by trustee Bondar. Trustee Swanky, you want to speak at all?
Just briefly, this releases the funds. As an example, the CNCP, the Carbon Neutral Capture Capital Plan was highlighted. It's almost $1 million in funding to benefit this district. There's been great work from staff to prep these projects, and now we can go ahead with them.
Yeah, I just echo everything you said, but also I just wanted to point out for the benefit of everyone who's here, this isn't money that's coming out of our operating budget. This is special funding that we get and then we get to spend. So it's like in out, already assigned to other things. Okay. Anyone have anything else to say? All right, seeing none, all those in favor that the board approve first, second, and third reading of the capital project bylaw. Excellent, that's unanimous, trustees. Okay, so now we're going on to policy 141, role of the superintendent. Okay, so trustees, where we left off, we had brought this forward. This was voted to go to a ad hoc committee, which trustee Swanky and I worked on with the secretary treasurer. We brought a motion forward at the last meeting. Trustee Westerby proposed an amendment, which was moved and seconded. And then it was a big amendment, so we voted to move it and come back and look at it. So that's where we are right now. We're in the middle of the amendment. So we're now discussing the amendment. In your package, it is laid out, like, because we're in the middle of the amendment is first, and then the motion is second. That's not to try to influence you to accept or not accept the amendment. That is just the way it's laid out because that's the order we have to address it in. So if the amendment passes, we would then be talking about the motion as amended, which is in the package also with, like, there's the track changes first, then there's the not track changes. If the amendment fails, then we would go back to the original motion as presented by the committee, and then we would discuss that and then either pass it or not. Okay, so I did not keep a list of who had spoken to the amendment. Yeah, so I'm just going to, we're just going to have to pretend that part never happened. I don't think we talked about it very much because we ended up moving to refer it. So I'm going to go to trustee Westerby, who moved the amendment, to speak, and then we'll discuss the amendment.
Thank you. So I don't want to speak to the merits of the original policy that was proposed because we hadn't even gotten a chance to get to there yet. I did have some amendments, but I feel that they were relatively minor overall. There were some pieces that I do want to see us go into a little bit further, but let me just pull up what I wrote. So the main reason for the superintendent's evaluation is for the trustees to maintain alignment with the strategic plan and fulfill our duty to the community and to the superintendent by clearly communicating his role and our expectations in a fair and professional manner. So I'm prepared to withdraw these current amendments, and I would like to continue to discuss it into the next round of discussions, and we can go from there.
Okay, so trustee Westerby is suggesting he would withdraw his amendment. I can do that by, once an amendment's moved and seconded, it belongs to the board. So if I had unanimous consent to do that, the mover has offered to withdraw his amendment, I would just do that. We could go back to discussing the original motion. Is there any opposition to that? Okay. Sorry, I did not have my button pressed. Did anyone? I'm not sure how much that got recorded. So basically, trustee Westerby moved to withdraw his amendment. It just said he would withdraw the amendment. So we're actually going back to the original motion as a policy as it was sent forward by the committee. So now I think we'll go back to discussing that. So as if none of that discussion happened, because I did not keep a list of who had spoken to it or not. So we're just going to start over. Thank you, trustee Westerby. Who moved and second? Oh, I moved. Okay, so I'm just going to, I guess, just remind everyone of what we were doing as the committee. So we tried really hard to put together a list of expectations for the superintendent that we think that trustees have enough experience to understand whether the superintendent is good at that or not, or that the superintendent could give us specific examples so that we would know whether he was good at that or not. Because our old superintendent roles and expectations policy was very kind of hard for trustees to evaluate when we were evaluating the superintendent. So that was what a lot of the work that we did. I think that it's a good first start. I think if we were to do the superintendent review this year and think that there were some big gaps, we could definitely revisit this policy next year. And I think that some of the lines that Trustee Westerby had suggested that could be in there, I think are actually things that the superintendent could show us to show that he has done some of the points that are already in there. So I think between some of that feedback that we got, I think we're in a good position moving forward. So that's why I support this motion, but I'm looking to hear what everyone else thinks now. Trustee Westerby.
Thank you. So I'm glad we got a chance to move forward into discussion. I did have some concerns about the general kind of high level look at accessibility and in the schools and inclusion. However, I do think, like, after last year's review, we agreed that it didn't really accurately reflect our current understanding of the superintendent's roles and responsibilities. So I think that if we, like as explained by the chair, if we continue to do the work, look at it, see how it works for us, then we could potentially continue to adopt and keep it up to date. So I would like this board to continue to review this policy after we implement it, specifically before December 2025, to inform the superintendent's evaluation of 2026 and ensure alignment with the strategic plan. And I am prepared to make that as a motion, Chair, if you feel like that's appropriate.
I don't know if we need a motion for that, or can we just add it to make sure that we add it to the board's work plan? Unless there's any trustees who don't like that idea, I think we can make a commitment to just putting this back into board consideration for next year. Is that okay with everybody here? Yeah. Okay, perfect. So, yeah. Would anyone else like to say anything about this policy? Oh, Trustee Moss.
I'm still very uncomfortable with the fact that we are dealing with a labor issue in a public board meeting, which makes it difficult for us to actually have a fulsome conversation about this this policy. This actually, I believe, should have been done in camera with the entire board, well, except me. And so I am very opposed to even entertaining this policy in a public board meeting. This falls under land labor law, which are in-camera items, and this is clearly a labor issue. Thank you.
Trustee Swank.
Thank you, Chair. I'll speak just briefly. First, speak in favor. I'd appreciate the work done. I also appreciate the honoring of input that was received from members and the opportunity to incorporate some of those considerations and to incorporate it into our work plan next year, I think is a positive. It'll serve the board well. Just to the comment regarding policy, is consistently the practice of adopting and reviewing policy in view of the public. That's an expectation of board governance. So while I appreciate the concerns of my colleague, I don't believe that that is, in fact, a fair representation of the way in which policy work is done by boards of education in our district or in this province.
Is there anyone else? Because I was just going to close out quickly, but if anyone else wants to speak. Yeah, so I just want to reiterate what Trustee Swanky just said. This is already a policy. This is not a new policy. This is literally already a policy that was approved actually relatively recently by the board. It's always done in public. The superintendent evaluation, however, is an in-camera item and will not be done in public. So the actual evaluation of the superintendent absolutely is a labor issue, will be done out of view of the public. We're not going to grill the superintendent in front of y'all. But the policy itself is a public policy. All right. All those in favor of adopting policy 141, role of the superintendent as presented? Opposed? The motion carries. Okay, we are on to 6.3, policy 130, trustee code of conduct.
Thank you, Chair. Let me just introduce the work that's gone on. So just a sort of a summary statement, because I think I'm going to be able to lay the framework around the trustee code of conduct. So back in June 2023, the Minister of Education and Childcare And the British Columbia Trustees Association released a memo outlining provincial guidelines regarding updating all the trustee codes of conduct across the province. The guidelines support the principles underpinning codes of conduct and promote consistency in the application of the code throughout the province. Some level of consistency is the expectation. The ministry actually did a review of all the codes of conduct in all 60 school districts. We received the letter. I received the letter in August of 2023. And part of our review was pretty much commonality on some of the other school districts too, indicating that we had to be able to develop a breaches and sections component that was missing in our existing policy 130. A couple of things. The province has come up with some clear criteria in building codes of conduct, and they would like all districts to follow through. There's a deadline date for us to submit this, which is the end of April. Got a reminder last week from the ministry, which I shared with the members of the Board of Education. Emphasis on student achievement, equity, and well-being. Alignment with the BCSD's principal standards of codes of conduct, which are confidentiality, conflicts of interest, integrity, relationships, respect, and responsibility. Alignment with existing provincial and federal legislation. And then provisions on respectful workplace and relationships with others, anti-racism, reconciliation, and relations with local First Nations, and acceptable use of social media. Also policies and procedures for breaches and sanctions within public accountability. Mechanisms to regularly review and affirm the code, board training, including with trustees onboarding, and the incorporation of plain language. I do want to, the board knows this, the board spent over five sessions, approximately 10 hours of learning and focus on being able to revise the policies aligned with the ministry direction. And so at the end of the day, once we send this in, the ministry will provide some feedback if you're not aligned. So I want to provide that context to members of the Board of Education.
Thank you, Superintendent, for that context. So as mentioned, trustees were all given the opportunity to participate in this. So many trustees spent over 10 hours talking about this policy, going over it line by line. Hopefully it's not a surprise to most people since we all worked on it. So the superintendent gave the context, but this is obviously our policy. It's about our conduct. So I will not get a trustee to make the motion so that we trustees can speak to the motion. Trustee Bondar.
I will move, whoops, where am I here? I will move that the Board of Education adopts policy 132, addressing is that?
Sorry, it's the wrong one.
Am I on the wrong one? Oh, sorry. I will move the Board of Education amend policy 130, trustee code of conduct as presented.
Thank you. Seconded by Trustee Westerby. Trustee Bondar, would you like to speak to the motion?
Yeah, just to say that it's been an awesome session of working and just wordsmithing and really kind of hashing out exactly how it can go. And I mean, it's not something you really know how to do before you really go through this process. So it's been a long slog, but I think we have a really great policy now.
Trustee Westerby.
Yeah, thank you. I speak in favor. I think everybody worked really hard on this. What I really want to highlight is how we spent time working on the process and really emphasized a personal way of dealing with conflict and making sure that we are all on the same page before we move forward to anything official or sanction-wise. We were really cautious on how to make sure that our teamwork was upheld, and I really appreciated how we did that and the approach we took and making sure everybody was considered. And I also appreciate for myself having some clear guidelines on how it's best that I am to behave as a trustee. So I really appreciate that as well because it's very helpful. So I speak in favor of this.
Trustee Reed.
Thank you, Chair. I'd speak in favor of the motion as well. I just wanted to add that I've made extensive use of the BCSTA portal. I nerded out a lot bit on trustee codes of conduct. I searched them up. I wanted to see how we stacked up previously and how this policy stacks up. And I did that before we even began this process. And I think it's very robust. I think it's very clear. And I think it's also it's really person-centered and it makes sense. So there's room all through the document, all through the policy for people to make a mistake and still own up to that mistake or change the way that they do business. And then there's clear accountability when they don't. And I think it holds us accountable to our public office. So I would, yes, speak in favor of this.
Trustee Moss.
Well, as a member of the last board that spent hours and hours and hours on the trustee code of conduct, I was dismayed to see this go another round of hours and hours and hours. When really this board could have been doing other things. Anyways, I would like to propose an amendment, and it's item number 22, where it says support the chair into representing. It's funny grammar.
Sorry,
Support-
that is actually a typo. I meant to mention, I should say in,
Okay,
not
but
into.
that-
But
well,
yeah.
that's not my amendment. So support the chair in representing the board in all board communications. I would like to propose an amendment that read in consultation with the board. And so that's my proposed amendment.
Does anyone want to second that?
For conversation, for discussion.
Can I just confirm the amendment? So it would read that, number 2, support the chair in consultation with the board in all board communications.
Yeah, so number 22, so, yeah,
Chair in consultation with, thank you.
yes.
I'm not seeing a seconder, so there's no seconder, so I won't go.
There we go.
Okay, I would just like to say I've been through this process twice talking about this specific policy, and I just want to say that I think that this version of the policy is a lot clearer. I think it's a lot easier to read. Our old one had some strange language. We'd started with some legalistic language and we tried to make it more clear, but then we kind of muddied it. We also took out specificity where it was needed and put it in where I think it wasn't. This time I feel like each item as a trustee, and I think as someone who was just looking at our policy, it's very easy to see what the rules and expectations, what the expectations are for trustees. I'm quite happy with it. I think it'll be easier for us to follow. It'll be easier to say when something is a breach because it's more clearly laid out what the expectations are. So I'm excited to go forward with a better, more robust policy. Trustee Swanky, you haven't spoken yet, right? Yes.
Thank you, Chair. Appreciate the opportunity. I'll speak in favor and I'll only speak once, given the limitations of our time this evening. I did want to highlight just one line within policy that I think resonates. By adopting and adhering to the Trustee Code of Conduct, the board strives to ensure it remains focused on a high-functioning public education system that supports the well-being of students as they become educated citizens. The crux of this is staying focused on student well-being, on the well-being of the system, of not being preoccupied with individual conduct. To me, it reflects a set of reasonable commitments, one that I would expect to myself, and I hope that's shared by my colleagues. So I speak in favor, and I think we have a good piece of work that is reflected in the policy.
Did you want to speak for a second time?
Yep, there's actually a number of very good considerations in this policy. I look forward to this entire board actually abiding by this code of conduct. All of us. Thank you.
Just before we vote, I do want to point out that there is a typo in line 22, so it should say support the board in representing the board in all communications, so not into, just to be clear. We're going to fix that. We don't need to do an amendment. It's just a misprint. Okay, so.
On that note, there's a few periods missing on like point 14 and random stuff, so just keep an eye out for things like that.
Right.
Yeah, okay. So all those in favor that the Board of Education amend policy 130 trustee code of conduct as presented? Opposed? Motion carries. Okay, thank you, trustees. We're moving on to policy 132, addressing breaches of the trustee code of conduct. Okay, so as mentioned by the superintendent, this is necessary. We need to do this. The ministry is telling us we need to do this. So can I get a trustee to move this, please? Trustee Bond.
I will move that the Board of Education adopt policy 132, addressing breaches of the trustee code of conduct as presented.
Seconded by trustee Bondar. Would you like to speak to?
Is again just having those very specific, tangible steps to take. Sort of very unnerving to decide to take an action and then have no roadmap for what that might look like. So yeah, really great work from everybody, and I think we have a really solid, strong, personal to us way of moving forward.
Trustee Wester.
Thanks. I mentioned a few things in the last policy about how we work to do this in a way that we're focused on our relationship and maintaining our relationship as members of this board. And I just want to reiterate that and speak in favor of this. And we did a lot of work, and we even have a handy visual flow chart, which we developed on that whiteboard back there. So it's helpful. It's more accessible. It's easier to understand, and it's clear to the community as well why we do what we do. So speaking in favor of this, and thanks everybody for their hard work.
Okay, I'm not seeing any other hands up. So all those in favor that the Board of Education adopt policy 132, addressing breaches of the trustee code of conduct as presented. Opposed? Motion carries. Okay, so we're on to policy 610, financial planning and reporting amendment. Oh, and sorry, I believe this is actually not 610. Is this the one where we were going to change the number? Yes, okay. Sorry, we did have, after the agenda came out, Trustee Swanky pointed out that there was an overlapping numbers in the policy manual because of some changes that we've made. So we do need to change the number before we talk about this, but it's, other than that, it's just the number needs to change. Secretary Treasurer will tell us what number it is and we can make the motion with the correct number and change that.
Yeah, I have to confess it's a little embarrassing when the Secretary Treasurer gets the number wrong. It happens. So I'm bringing to you tonight a recommendation to change policy. Should I do the two of them together? Yeah. Okay, 600 a little bit and 601 fairly substantially. So in the packet you'll see there are small edits to 610. They're basically, we sent both of these policies to the ministry for review. And just so you don't think that every single policy we do needs to go to the ministry, it just happens that the two that the ministry do expect on code of conduct and our financial policies, we happen to be bringing to you tonight. I think it's the first time we've done this all year. But 600, they came back with a few small edits. You can see they wanted us to add that we will provide the ministry with our plan. So you now know that who wrote that, and the way we reference the ministry. So small changes there. 611 formerly, now 601, is more significant. So I've put together a slide deck on that. Can we?
So just to clarify, it says in our package 610 and 611, but it's actually 600 and 601.
Yes.
Okay, I just needed to make sure I knew which was.
And what I did was I prepared a fairly detailed briefing note on this, and that's in the packet. So I'm really going to try and fly a little higher. So earlier this evening, I shared this slide with you. It said that our current policy has two main things it talks about. You know, we'll identify the surplus, and we aim for a contingency reserve of 3.5. Let's go to the next slide. We talked a little bit earlier about sort of the governance expectations of the board, and the ministry goes into a lot more detail on that, and they have a guide. So I'm just sort of sharing that with you there. So they want us to do this policy. They gave us a guide on how to do it, and they're reviewing it, just so you get a taste of what we're looking at here. So here are a couple of the key things that are in the policy now. We will be required to bring, prior to bringing the annual budget, the amended budget, and actually at the same time as we bring the audited year-end financial statement, we will be bringing a report to the committees or the board, or all of them, that includes details on how we are using the accumulated operating surplus and local capital. Now, that's new. Then I go on to say what the report will include. Now, this is probably a little technical. You don't, need to read it here. I'm going to show it to you on the next slide. And the punchline is the board will then provide a recommendation on it. So, this will engage the board in part of that responsibility that we talked about earlier of, you know, knowing what's going on with the budget and approving it. So we're sort of providing a lot more information on the idea of surplus, and then how it's being used. I may have got the slides mixed up around the wrong one. That's what I'm thinking. Yeah, I do actually want the other one first. You're all probably sitting here. I don't know if anybody's an accountant. I'm going to quickly scan the room. But the accumulated surplus is like our bank accounts, right? It's kind of the money we have sitting there, and then I earn a paycheck and I'll spend some of it. I may save some of it, in which case I'll be adding to my bank account or accumulated surplus, or I may earn my paycheck and I'll spend it, and actually I need to pull on some of the money from my bank account, in which case I'm drawing on my accumulated surplus. So when I say the board will be approving the use of the surplus, I'm saying the board is approving us adding to it or subtracting from it. But there's some categories within the accumulated surplus that are kind of locked off, and that's part of the technical stuff that's in this policy and part of what the ministry wanted also to know. But there's a portion that should be locked off. You know, this is good practice, this is healthy practice, as a rainy day fund. And we do that in our own affairs. Well, you know, most of us try to, right? You have a rainy day fund for things that might not happen the way you think they will, which, as we said earlier in the budget presentation, the enrollment estimates might not come in. There might be an earthquake. There might, you know, there might be a flood. There's all sorts of things that might happen that we need some contingency reserve or unrestricted operating surplus contingency. You can see it down there. That's what, you know, that's all about. So what you can see here is I talked about whether you could add to or subtract from the bank account. In this example, this is actual live data from last year. We added 1.2 million to the accumulated surplus, but we subtracted 1 million by putting it into a locked spot, leaving only 5.9 or almost 6 million as available as a reserve, right? So if you look at the math here, that's sort of it. Just track that 1.231. So that's how we use it. That's how we're planning on using the surplus in this particular year. If we go back to the other slide, you'll see that that's the current year bank account. You can see our money coming in was 165,587. We plan to spend 163. And then remember that local capital transfer I was talking about before to pay for the vehicles and the equipment in capital? That left us with a net of 1.23. So that's the kind of reporting that we envisage providing the board with to provide clarity on what our financial position is, the impact it has on accumulated surplus, and how we're using our accumulated surplus in the future. So anyway, a little bit of an accounting lesson there, sorry. That's kind of what the policy asks, but I hope that the result of this policy is providing two schedules that I think you'll provide useful information to the board as you consider the budget and amended budgets and so forth. So I'm putting this to the board for with a recommendation to approve. And yes, this policy was approved by the ministry. I got the thumbs up.
Thank you, Secretary Treasurer. Okay, so we've got two policies before us. As the Secretary Treasurer mentioned, we have policy 600 now, which is the Financial Planning and Reporting Amendment, which is a small amendment. There's just a couple changes, I think. And then the policy 601 includes all of this new sort of how we're going to get reported to. We will start with policy 600, which in the package says 610. Are there any questions about this before we make the motion? Yes, Trustee Swanky. Oh.
Thank you. So this is discussing how the surplus is, how it's delegated. So does this now, so we have a policy that says we want a certain percentage of the budget to be held back as a surplus, right? And so, not as a surplus, what do we say? I don't know. I can't remember. Contingency, right? In case the furnace blows up or whatever, right? And so are these replacing that, or does that policy still stand? So the board is not speaking into how much it wants to set aside anymore? Okay.
So the policy, what we did was we removed that from the policy, that particular reference, but the board will speak into it at every single budget cycle. So rather than having a target, you know, saying this is the number, it's something that what we did was we moved it to procedure, and it says 2 to 4%. And that's something that the board should be, you know, clearly you'd want to target the middle of that range, right? But it's extremely hard in the budget of 200 and whatever million we have now to hit an exact number. So having a raw number is silly. You've got to have a range. And then at some point in time, you might say, well, we want to have a reading initiative and we want to buy brand new textbooks. It's a one-time expenditure. We're prepared to go to 2.5. Or you might say, you know what, in a few years we want to do that reading initiative. Let's go to 3.5. Actually, let's go to 3.8 for now. And this is what we want. So that then becomes a discussion item. And yes, it is for the board to approve because you're the ones approving what the accumulated surplus should be.
Trustees, thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Just a question specific to policy 110, the second page of the policy 600 presented to us as policy 610. The second page, the proposed policy outlines a process for the annual financial planning and reporting. And I just wondered, there's been some discussion about enhancing the amount of engagement with First Nations, specifically those with whom the district holds LEAs. I'm just wondering if there's enough flexibility in the current policy, or if we may look at a future iteration of this policy as we build that infrastructure.
I think I go with the latter of what you're saying. I think we just started those conversations and we haven't gone far enough. But yes, I agree. The intention probably is to change it, and then we would need to look at this to make sure it's aligned.
Yes, please.
Thank you. Not at all. I would ask a ruling of the chair on the just if this is in order, but I want to suggest that the motion ought to be that we repeal policy 610 and approve proposed policy 600.
Sounds good.
Sure, that's fine. You can say it that way. Talena, do you have that down? Is that way? Okay. That's a good idea.
Thank you. If there's a seconder, I'll speak further.
Did you actually move it, or were you asking if you could move it? Yes, okay. Yes. So moved, okay. Trustee Westerby seconds that. Trustee Sway.
Thank you. Appreciate the work of staff to update and renew this policy. As it continues to evolve, I'll look forward to future iterations of it. If I may just note the addition of the repeal with the changing the numbering, it's important that we remove outdated or basically useless policies so we don't have overlap and conflict within our policy book. So my appreciation to staff for making that pivot, and yeah, appreciate the work done to get the policy presented.
Is there any other discussion on policy 600? Trustee West.
I just want to thank the Secretary Treasurer for catching this. I think that it's actually really important for us as a growing district to be able to make some adjustments to the contingency. And I just want to say thanks again to the work and speak in favor of it.
Yeah, I just wanted to really briefly say, you know, for the most of the time that I've been on this board, we were in financial straits, so we were never able to achieve our target that was in our policy. But I like going forward that it is a range now, so that we're not also obligated to put a certain amount in if we had something else we really wanted to spend it on. So there's that little bit of flexibility. I think it gives the board much more control on, not control, but oversight and ability to make good decisions depending on the needs of the district. So. Okay, seeing no other questions or comments, all those in favor that the Board of Education repeal policy 610 and approve policy 600 as presented. Opposed? Okay, motion carries. So we're moving on to what was presented as 611, but it's actually 601 now. So we'll do the same. We'll do the same motion for this one. So this is the one that is more the way it will be presented in the tables that'll be given to the board and all of that. So, does anyone want to make this motion? Trustee Westerby. Ooh.
Before I do, can I have a quick point of privilege?
Yes.
Just what should we do the same thing where we repeal?
Yeah, that's perfect. Just say repeal policy 611 and approve policy 601.
Okay, I'm gonna try my best. I move that the Board of Education repeal policy 611 and approve of policy 601 as presented. I got it.
Seconded by Trustee Bond. Trustee Westerby, do you want to speak?
Oh, yeah, I think that the same thing as I said before, this is really important work to allow us as a growing district to find the funds we need to achieve our goals.
Okay, did you want to speak? Sorry.
I'll speak in favor. I appreciate the bringing forward this range. I think that kids learn in the long term, but they also learn every day. So whenever possible, we want to put resources like in the classroom. And so I think having that lower threshold as appropriate serves the district well. I'll also just note the enhanced role of the budget committee within this process and the oversight of the this surplus, operating surplus being held by the district. So I think that also serves us well. We'll be more involved in considering the surplus management. And overall, I think, again, this serves us well, supported by administrative procedure, and I appreciate the work of staff to bring forward.
Okay, not seeing any other questions or comments. All those in favor of the Board of Education repeal policy 611 and approve policy 601 as presented. Opposed. Motion carries. Okay, so we're on to 7, meeting summaries, which are in the package. Number 8 is public participation, comments or questions concerning the agenda, same rules as before.
So it's Linda D'Armani, and I was gonna ask some questions about the policy 130 and 132. I noticed that in there it says the code of conduct twice the government asks you to have public accountability, and so does that mean that things will change? That when there's a breach of the trustees breach the code of conduct, that there will be some public accountability? Oh, well, it says it in both places in policy 130 and in policy 132. It says public accountability. It says right on.
I know it's saying 2 words about a whole sentence.
All right. Well, all right. Anyways, and it also says acceptable use of social media. Does that mean that you will no longer demonize Christians and Christian values?
You can sit down. Thanks. You can sit down now, thanks.
Excuse me.
On the agenda is the policy as presented. If you have so we're not talking about trustee conduct. In the policy, it says any complaints about trustee conduct have to happen within 30 days of the offense. We've got a brand new policy, and going forward, we're going to enforce that policy. So I expect all trustees to be careful about what they post on social media going forward. Thank you.
Oh. Does that mean offend?
I need a motion from trustees I'm going to move myself actually that we extend the meeting till the conclusion of our business. It's seconded by Trustee Swanky. All those in favor of extending the meeting to the conclusion of our business? Opposed? Motion carries. Thanks. Sorry, it's just in a policy it can only be 3 hours and we're going over time. So, but we are still in public participation. So if anyone has any other questions, feel free to come to the mic.
Linda, and I'd like to ask a question on the budget. So if the is there going to be like $40,000 for menstrual products in the new budget? or is it going to be more than that?
Linda, we have already told you that we are not talking about line items of the budget today. This was the public budget presentation. There was no mention of menstrual products in the public budget presentation. You've already also asked that question multiple times via email, so it's been asked and answered. Okay, then maybe write an email then. I suggest asking that by email. Okay, I'm not seeing any other questions or comments from the public. So we are going to move on to Superintendent's update. Superintendent.
Really quickly, I'm going to have Mrs. John introduce our guest from GWG. Thanks for your patience. It's about a presentation that's aligned with our strategic plan. Mrs. Jordan.
Thank you, Superintendent. It's my pleasure to be able to introduce Principal Chuck Lawson, who really championed this project that is going to be presented this evening, along with Vice Principal Miss Beth Clark, who I would say was probably the inspiration behind, the visionary, right, behind this project, and Mr. Matt DiMartino. Did I pronounce that, Matt, right? Probably, yeah. Who operationalizes it every day. So, please come up and share a little bit of your journey.
Can you press your button? As you're proceeding to the mic, I just want to thank you for your patience. I know that we're running over time. You've been sitting here all evening waiting for us to get to you, so I appreciate you and your patience. Fantastic. Just press the right-hand button on the speaker that's on the podium and stand in front of it so that everyone can hear you.
Let's go. Trustees, guests, and executive, thanks for having us. We're really excited to talk today about this new program that we've been running this year. It's called Graham Y. I guess we'll move on. So the vision behind this program started about this time last year. Myself and Principal Chuck Lawson were talking about a group of students that we were seeing that are still struggling to engage, disconnected from our schools, and kind of the look of how can we bring those students back in, and kind of the desire to create a new and unique program that we could look at education a little bit differently, and how to connect those students back to school. And so what we thought of is we wanted to create a program that had some flexibility, had some choice. We wanted to connect movement with mental health, as we know, background in counseling. Exercise is so important for overall wellness and really positively impacts mental health. So we wanted to include that in the program. So we actually kind of hit the streets, and we ended up looking around for spaces, and we connected with the YMCA, the Sham Center, YMCA, Lauren Jansen there, and we kind of brought this kind of our vision and program, and together we created a partnership and a program. So the Graham Y program supports student learning, wellness, and community connection through an off-site experience in partnership with the Sham Center, Leisure Center, YMCA. Through Graham Y, students participate in a well-rounded wellness experience that explores personal development in areas of physical fitness and social emotional learning. So we're just going to show a video. I think I gotta exit out of here because it doesn't seem to work that well. Shoot, where did I have it? Yeah, sorry.
Can I just share that?
Sorry. Can you push your button so Paul?
Yeah, sorry.
In your trustee packages, in the board package for this week, there is a one-page document that's connected to the strat plan updates. And in that document, it has some detailed information that Beth is likely going to share a little bit with you tonight, but you can delve a little bit deeper, as well as the link to this video once Beth gets it up and running. So you can also have a look at it, and please feel free to share at your own time.
Hi, my name is Connor. I'm in grade 12.
My name is Sarah Lee Winter. I'm in grade 12.
I'm Erica Stoles. I'm grade 12.
My name is Dallin Tournier, and I'm in grade 11.
My name is Mr. DiMartino. I am the teacher in charge of the Graham-wide program at the Sheehan Center.
My name's Beth Clark, and I'm the vice principal, kind of.
Hi, my name is Connor. I'm in grade 12.
My name is Sarah Lee Winter. I'm in grade 12.
I'm Erica Stoles. I'm grade 12.
My name is Dallin Tournier, and I'm in grade 11.
My name is Mr. DiMartino. I am the teacher in charge of the Graham-wide program at the Sheehan Center.
My name's Beth Clark, and I'm the vice principal, kind of attached to the program. Graham Y is a partnership between us and the Y, in which kids are given a full year membership to the Y, and they come here for the afternoons, and they have full access to all the facilities. So whether they want to go for a swim, or they want to use any of the weights or the cardio equipment, they also have squash courts and open gym, and the students can kind of have their choice of what activities. They have opportunities to get 12 credits of courses, so 2 different PE courses, as well as a personal development.
Graham Y is like a program where you can come and work on yourself. Like, there's many opportunities here. You can use like the gym facility. There's a whole like basketball court, weight room. You can go swimming, or you can work on homework if you need to catch up on other classes.
It makes it easy to get a lift if you feel like you need it that day.
Graham Y is like a program that helps students that have a hard time going to school, but like they want to, and like you work on your own time instead of having people tell you what to do all the time, which makes it less stressful for you.
Personally, I like just being able to come here and work out. It's a great time, and then it makes my day easier.
I like the freedom of it, where like you don't constantly have somebody like breathing down your neck telling you what to do every 5 seconds, and it's like relaxing because like you, again, like Erica said, you just kind of work at your own pace.
I like the fact that I can have freedom around here. I'm able to bring a skateboard some days and go skateboard outside. I'm able to use anything around here, and I'm given a full membership to come in on the weekends or weekdays whenever I feel I want to.
I go to school more now because
I feel like I have like more motivation to come do something that I'd want to do, and I have more options on what I want to do with half my day.
Honestly, it just made it better. Made it a lot easier to make, because I now only have 2 classes in the morning. Makes it a lot less stressful.
I think yeah. I stopped skipping. My attendance got so much better. Yeah. Yes, my attendance has went up.
Yeah, absolutely. Again, I think these students are students that need that flexibility, and having options and giving them choice allows that. So going in the pool, sometimes the SHEAM Center offers classes such as yoga. There's a yoga class usually on Friday when we're scheduled to be in here. And then also just, they don't have to use the SHEAM Center during the hours we're here. They have the flexibility of maybe coming on weekends with their friends or after school. So yeah, it's given them a lot of opportunities when it comes to that.
Just some observations when I've come by is I've seen people really challenging themselves, putting themselves outside their comfort zone, taking on new things. I was here one day and saw someone learning to dive with a swim instructor. I've seen other kids commit to different activities such as squash and yoga and things that they might not normally have done. I would say another favorite part is seeing faces in here and students here who maybe haven't attended in a few years or have not been engaged with school for many years, and they finally found an area where they feel they can connect to school and they can fit in with their peers, as well as the freedom to kind of make decisions and be independent in how they navigate their education.
And I think something just to add on top of that, it's allowed myself, Miss Clark, I'm sure, and then our youth care worker, Julie, just to kind of make connections with these students, and something that we may have not been able to do in past years. So it's allowing us to get to know them a little bit more, and helping them kind of find maybe a passion they didn't really know that they might have been interested in.
I don't see the, oh, mine's working. When they were talking, the thing wasn't going up and down. Can you push it? Oh, perfect, okay. Sorry, go ahead.
The school district's vision for human and social development and successful transitions by connecting students to rich opportunities to explore wellness, fitness, and a creation of a healthy lifestyle and ways to support overall health and community. Graham Y is committed to providing supports for the well-being of all our students.
Okay, so these are some of the courses that we offer at Graham Y. So the main one being the personal development, and I'll get back to that one in a second. And the other ones that we offer are strength and conditioning. If they need a PE credit, physical education 10, or active living 11 to 12, and mindfulness and movement. Now the big thing with personal development is all the students are connected to that. And from there, it's a combination of any of the other classes that you see on the list here. So that could be strength and con, maybe that's something that they're interested in, or maybe it's a credit that they don't have. And each credit is worth 4 credits, so potentially they could be getting 12 credits altogether. And this is the structure of what Graham Y looks like, kind of like a day at Graham Y. The big thing is the students get a membership at the SHEAM Center, and they can use all parts of the facility. Nothing's half of the membership is covered by the Y, so we're super grateful that they've been able to put up that sponsorship for us, and they've been awesome throughout the whole process. And then as soon as students get to the Y, they're to connect with myself and our youth care worker, who's Julie, at the beginning of every day. And these are mostly for, check-ins to set goals. It could be a weekly goal, it could be a daily goal. Goals can include something with fitness, it could be their wellness, or maybe they have something with their academics and they need to get some work done that they didn't finish at school in their morning classes. And then at the end of the day, they'll fill out a daily reflection. This could be a goal they set for the day, or maybe a goal they set for the week. and see if they accomplished it. And then myself and Julie were available throughout the whole day just to offer any support, any schoolwork, those check-ins, and then any help in the weight room if they need it. And then lastly, the big thing with this is students get choice and what activities they can engage with. So it could be swimming, it could be playing basketball, it could be squash. I think the Shame Center is the only squash courts in Chilliwack, so something that they may have not been familiar with. And then all of the Y fitness classes that they offer, they can also use that. And then here's some of the results from semester 1. So as you can see, 31 students were registered and we had 81 course completion. So pretty successful, only 7 incomplete. And then just below that, we have a few quotes from Graham Y. Parent, and I swear we didn't pay anyone to say these things. So I'll read off a few of them, I won't read all of them. This one's from a Graham Y. Parent. I'm so pleased about the Graham Y. program. It's made such a huge difference, my child. Is so excited about being able to manage school. And another one, having the freedom to choose your own activities and having the trust of the adults makes me feel motivated. I like the independence and flexibility.
So one of the questions we get asked is who is a Graham Y student? So the student profile, we want it to be quite flexible because we know there's a wide range of students that we want accessing this. So it's open to students grade 10 to grade 12. That's more on the Y front. They wanted 15-year-olds up, 15-year-old up. And all referrals for Graham Y go through our school-based team. We review every single request. It's become very popular. So we always review it and make sure it's the right fit. Students need to be able to manage behavior in a community setting and have a willingness to engage in physical activity. And what we are noticing is that all of our students have rose to the maturity and independence of being in the community setting. We have had essentially no issues at the Y, and the Y community has really grown to love our students. So that's been really good. So Graham Y students are students maybe who struggle to attend, who need extra support and connections, students who maybe aren't managing a full day in the traditional classroom setting, students who need more movement, students who need a smaller space, and students who need more flexibility and choice in their day. So we wanted to highlight 2 stories. We have asked the students to share their stories, but we're not going to share their name just because they aren't here. But we're going to go through 2 different stories of students.
Yeah, so the first one, this is a girl that has really struggled with mental health in her early days of high school. She was a non-attender for years. And she actually sent a letter to the board about offering more programs to help students with mental health. So when we came up with the idea of this program, we thought she would be a great candidate for it, and it's worked out really well for her. She's absolutely thrived in it. She's met some new friends, her attendance has improved, and she's actually found fitness as a way to improve her overall mental health. And we're hoping that this is something she'll continue down the road when she graduates. And actually, I have a quote to read from her. Forgot about that. Okay. I think it's great to see more programs for students that might struggle in the traditional classroom. I think having flexibility and options to do what you want was helpful. I've made a couple of friends. It's good to feel a part of something.
The second student, last year this student unexpectedly lost their mother and started really struggling at school and wasn't attending anymore and starting to make some life choices that weren't necessarily getting them on the right track. I noticed they were skipping a lot, and so when I took this student aside and asked them where they're going, they said to the gym. And I said, what are you doing there? And they're like, just like, it keeps me afloat, it keeps me surviving. And I said, well, I got a program for you. Next year, we're gonna create this Y program. And since you're someone, it sounds like, really likes health and fitness and have that, I'd like you to start as our peer tutor. And so we brought him in, and I think it was the next day he came to and talked to Mr. Lawson and said this is the first time he's felt like hopeful again about school and about life. And he has thrived. He's been our peer tutor the entire time. He's brought in kids. He's been a leader. Even I was there on, what day was it? Monday, sorry. And he was there with some of like the elderly people in there, showing them different machines. So he's getting out, he's doing that. It's something now that he thinks he might want to pursue post-secondary, and this kid has totally turned around. And yeah, he was excited for me to share his story because he feels really proud of where he's come and what's happened with him. So yeah. Okay, so next steps for the program. We just want to continue incorporating different programs from the Y. I'm actually meeting with the Y tomorrow in hopes that maybe we can expand this to other programs and sites for some of the other schools if possible. So I'm meeting with them tomorrow to present and just continue promoting the program within our community and making it accessible to kids that need it. Yes, and I want to finish by thanking everyone. I really want to thank Lauren Jansen and the Y Sham Center for taking on this program and sponsoring our students. Thank you to the executive. I know sometimes it's a little unnerving when Chuck and I call you with different ideas, but for taking this risk and allowing us to create the program. And lastly, I really want to thank Matt. You know, when we talk about people building programs, you've taken a lot of care and kindness to build this program, and it's really going to impact kids, and it's really helped us here. So yeah, anyways, thank you.
Okay, thanks everyone.
Thank you so much. That was so interesting. And I just, sorry, I'm going to give everyone else a chance, but since I just happened to grab the mic first. But no, I I think it's really innovative and really interesting to have a program that gives the kids actual independence, but then accountability. Because if you just give them full independence, you know, they're teenagers, they might just, you know, go away and you might lose them. But I love the combination of that, like, it's actual independence. Like, you get to go to the Y, you get to set your program, we're not going to hover over you. And I think that I can really see, and even think back to my own high school days, of kids who would have loved that, because they felt grown up, but they needed that bridge between high school and adulthood, right? And so I think it's just fantastic. And I can also see how it could really, you know, not that we don't love our alternate school, but, you know, the more kids we can keep in regular school, the better for everybody. So amazing. Thank you. Trustee Bonder. Oh. Sorry, Trustee Bonder. Let's up there first and then.
Okay, thank you. This was an awesome presentation. Thank you so much. And this program, wow, it's so needed. And it strikes me as something that, as you were just saying at the end, Beth, like, could be really widely applicable. The notion of movement, the notion of just getting up and moving your body is really, like, it's key. And we actually do need programs that take kids, get them out of their seats, get them moving. This is awesome. Thank you so much. I would love to see this, like, across the district too. Cheers.
Trustee Reed, after.
Yeah, so this is actually really personal to me. I was a YMCA kid, so when I was 11 years old, we had no resources, and the YMCA sponsored membership is how I ended up volunteering. I ended up getting a job there, working in the youth programs until I was in my 20s. It got me a scholarship. It changed my life. I'm getting really emotional seeing, like, the Shib Center hallways up there, and thank you so much. Like, I can't even imagine if I had been able to transition. That program was what made me successful in school, but if it had been in school, then it would have been, I don't even know. But thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for the presentation. More importantly, thank you for the work. I had two questions, if I may. First, when you're imagining an opportunity, a learning opportunity like this, you mentioned, I think, 4 classes. Are those looking at what's offered by the ministry and finding your own flavor? Is it looking at BAA courses? I'm just wondering, like, what are the resources you pull upon? The other piece is just, you're a year into this. Is this uniquely a Graham opportunity, or is this something you could imagine working well in other schools given the positive benefit it's had for students?
Oh, yeah. Okay, thanks. So with regards to the courses, we did pull on some BAA, which is the mindfulness and movement, as well as ministry courses. So strength and conditioning, which is under fitness and conditioning now, active living, and PE 10. But we actually look at each kid. So I go through and look at each kid's profile and what best suits their needs, and then I timetable them into those. So it's kind of what the focus is for them and kind of where we see them. So some kids are more into, like yoga, some of like the strength training, and then other people are more in like, we have some squash players, some pickleball, like some of that. So they might more the active living, the PE kind of flavors there. I definitely do. Right now it is unique to GW Graham. And like I said, I am meeting with the Y tomorrow in hopes that maybe this is an opportunity. I know our alternate school, I was talking with the principal there, would love to get something going at the YMCA here. And I think CSS as well has talked about the landing. So they're kind of managed by different people. So right now, my hope is that when I present tomorrow, that maybe we can get more just education on it and what that looks like, and hopefully offer it to other sites.
I'll just add in with that, just that, oh yeah, sorry, I'll come over. That, just that when you look at, I mean, the YMCA is brilliant, what they offer. And when you look at, if we take our learning beyond our school walls and look at what's happening in our community, that's when you start looking, going, if we can connect. So think of that, honestly, so where it can go for other schools. I think hopefully there's going to be, from this experience, there's going to be a growth in that area, because there's great learning in our community. So the connections and the partnerships. And then I think when our youth connect in that way, I also think it helps because they're connecting with our community in a positive way. Right? Yeah, good question. Sorry. Oh.
After having some conversation with some of the students that are attending the program, the other giant benefit is these students don't see themselves as they see themselves as Graham Y students, but they're GW Graham students. So they're not outside of. This is an extension of GW Graham. So I think that's the power in this too, that these that we're meeting students where they're at, and they're still GW Graham students.
Trustee Moss. Thank you. You actually are like a sanctuary to some of these kids, and I'm sure that you're saving kids, literally. And thank you for your compassion. I think it's fantastic. You'll let the board know if there's anything we can help you in doing this. I mean, because I know we'd all be really happy to help out. So thank you. Thank you for what you've done.
Thank you so much. Really appreciate it. Great presentation. Oh, that was your superintendent's update, right? That was an easy day for you this time. Okay. All right. So thank you, everybody. Our next Board of Education meeting is May 14th, 2024 at 5:30, and this meeting is adjourned. Thanks, everybody.